Alrighty then. Okay, so we're doing a political panel. We're doing the hippy dippy round table tonight. So let me just go ahead and give you the little rundown. All right, so first of all, we do have merch coming out now, and I'll have the link in the description when I release this. Okay, go get your merch. A portion of all the proceeds goes to a local foundation called Steps to Hope, a local charity. They're a nonprofit organization that provides shelter and education for domestic abuse victims. Okay, and also another sponsor, Bringing Spring, on Instagram and www.bringingspring.com. That is my beautiful mother. Use code NACHO25 and get 25% off all of your purchases, and I get a slice of the pie. Also, get 20% off your first purchase when you sign up for the email list, plus early access to new art, special promotions, and details for upcoming art shows. And again, just like with my merch, a percentage of all the purchases from her as well also go to Steps to Hope, a local nonprofit organization that provides shelter and education for domestic abuse victims. So please, please support. And of course, like, comment, subscribe, share, all the good stuff. Please and thank you. You're all beautiful people. Okay? Okay. All right. Let's see here. So we're going to have to mute this at some point. Burp. Okay, let's see. Okay, we're going to have to pull up, let's see, we're going to have to pull up Discord, and we're going to get in here. Okay, let's see here. Turn the camera on. Get the little screen popped out. Let's go. Okay, we're not making this full screen. Okay. Should probably be good. Let's see. We're going to, how we're going to do this. We're going to get this in the screen here. So we're going to do it like this. Let's see. Okay. Looks like that's in the screen. That is in the shot. How are we going to do this? We'll do this, do it like this. Should be pretty good. That's a fair size, right? I kind of want to sit right here, though. We might swap it the other way around. We might make my screen small and make this one big, or we'll just make this one big all the way. What shall we do? How is this not refreshing? Why is this not refreshing? It's cutting people off, and I'm not. It's not me. Oh, I know what that is. Okay, there's a filter on. Filters. Hide. Okay, there we go. Okay. Okay, you know what? I don't really care. Okay, that's how we're gonna do this. Gotta figure this out. We'll sit over here. Okay, let's chug some beer. cheers to everyone watching here and in the, okay, yeah, sorry guys, I haven't been paying attention. Space Force Nacho. True. The girl on the top right is hot. Oh wait. Oh, that's Destiny. Let's see what you did there. That's a good one. Although I am doing my best Destiny cosplay today, so. For the memes, let's go. Alright, let's should we unmute yet? I think we should unmute. Okay, let's try. Oh, Dylan Burns is unmuted.
But any violation of Twitch terms of service could lead to multiple panel members, including myself, from getting removed. And we would very much like to keep our jobs, so please don't do that. Second rule.
Wait, who?
Who asked? Anyway, now, continuing. The next rule is that anytime I am talking, I'm trying to enforce rules. Basically, just like bringing about rules and making sure that everything's going orderly. I'm not trying to jump in, okay? This isn't the Prime Kai show. This is the Dylan Burns show, okay? I am doing my own rules when it comes to how I speak, and it is only for moderation.
Fired, though.
Okay.
Yikes.
Next rule. Anytime I jump in, you are to immediately be quiet, and that means immediate silence. If you do not comply with that, after a few times, I'll just go straight into muting. Besides that, that's most of the rules, besides the fact that you respond to other people in the Twitch chat. I want you to respond to people here, and that if there ever gets a point where it's difficult for you to basically get into the conversation, don't worry. I understand that many of you are not debate pros by nature. You were not born in the debate streets like the rest of us. We have a little handy notepad. Well, I will. Oh, that's the wrong one. We have a little handy notepad here where I will write down your name if you raise your hand, and I'll make sure the conversation eventually gets over to you. But you are going to have to be patient with me as I eventually will bring it over to you. Is there any questions about any of the rules?
Doesn't take orders. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, yeah.
Nope. Wonderful. Thank you very much. Now, I'm going to go around the room, and for each topic, there's going to be a 1-minute intro and 1-minute outro. But for this time, we're just going to let people introduce themselves, shout themselves out, tell people who they're about. And we're going to start in the top left-hand corner, as always, with American Nacho, who's doing an amazing Destiny cosplay.
Hey, you got it, man. I'm American Nacho. I'm a gamer turned political commentator / activist. I mostly play Rocket League, but I do like to do some surprise rock band concerts every once in a while. If I have to claim my affiliations are center right, like a Tom Dewey Republican or a progressive Republican. Yes, we exist, and I know I'm fighting an uphill battle. If I had to sum up my goal in politics, I guess it would be to repair and continue to build a solid foundation for our government in the future. And I'm doing that by way of political advocacy and having somewhat productive discourse online, as well as getting involved in my state at the local level. Also, I just got merch, and all percentage of all the purchases go to Steps to Hope, which is a local nonprofit organization that provides shelter and education for domestic abuse victims. So, yeah, get your little T-shirt. Love you guys. Thanks for having me on as usual, Dylan.
Love to have you on American Nacho. Now we're going to go over to Destiny, who's doing an American Nacho cosplay.
Hi, I'm Destiny. I do left-leaning politics. What is our goal with politics? I just want people to have conversations that are rooted in reality and are so that means we have real conversations about real issues without making shit up or, yeah, that's it. Good luck.
Okay. Next is going to be Critically Thinking Veteran.
Yes, I am critically thinking.
I did the longest fucking intro I've ever done.
Submarines. I am the conservative main boss for this panel. So,
God.
For everybody that's fighting or going to be arguing on the side of the left tonight, understand that I'm going to be listening very intently to what you say and how you say it, and we'll be coming at the conversation in good faith. I will assume that you are as well. The point where I feel like you're not, you're going to see a different side. Let's hope we don't go there. Other than that, I'm looking forward to a good conversation.
I love you as always.
And as always, thanks for having me on, Dylan.
Love to have you on, CTV. Now we're throwing it over to Hunter Avalone.
Hey, Dylan. Thanks so much for having me on. My name is Hunter Avalone. I am a former conservative turned social democrat. Yeah, looking forward to having this discussion. You can find me on my YouTube channel and on my Twitch as well. Thanks again, Dylan, for hosting.
Happy to have you on.
I have no idea.
Now we're throwing it over to Sprouticus.
Hey, Dylan. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate the opportunity. Excuse me, my voice. I appreciate the opportunity. I'm excited to debate these topics.
Gotta plug
If you're
myself,
interested
man.
in my takes,
I felt
you
a
can
little
follow me at
awkward
Beast
about like
Braticus
plugging myself, and then I'm like,
Twitch.
you know what, fuck this.
Right now,
I
the
never do
video
this
title
on
is
anybody's.
Conservatives Are Right Theory,
And I've
otherwise
been on
known
here
as
several
CRT.
times, and I usually do like a really short
But yeah,
intro,
I'm
so.
looking forward to debating, and I'm looking forward to having a great night. If you're interested in what I'm drinking throughout the night, it's Ensign Red Mango. So yeah, other than that, looking forward to a great debate.
Wonderful. Happy to have you on. Now we're throwing it over to Joe Lewis.
Yeah, I'm Joe Lewis. You can find me at twitch.tv/Joe Lewis. I was sort of called in when Wake the Beast canceled and Fnatic was unavailable and Prime Legend was busy being Black is Superior. So I got called in to be the dissenting Black opinion on the panel. So I'm glad to be here. And also
Mentioning
just shout out to
Rocket
Dylan,
League,
shout out to the
I bet it
Dylan Burns
sounded like
community,
you.
and yeah, glad to be here.
Stream. Oh, I have no idea.
Happy to have
dude.
you on,
I'm a music
Joe.
teacher. That's all
What
that's all my
happened?
shit.
Wait,
right?
did the stream go down?
Wonderful. Thank you
Or
for
was that from
corrupting our
yesterday?
youth.
No, that's yesterday.
Now we're moving it over to
I was
Humanist
about to
Report.
say, get out of here with that.
Hi, everyone. I am Humanist Report. I love dogs, video games, and once in a while, I will upload videos to YouTube talking about politics. And I just want to say thank you so
Okay,
much
here we go.
to Dylan for the invite. I've never been on a debate panel before, so
Okay.
I believe after this concludes, I could start referring to myself as a debate bro, and I don't view that as a pejorative, so I'm just going to say that. So I'm really excited. Thank you so much.
Happy to have you on. And lastly, we're going to throw it over to Kevin Castley of Superpower Broadcasting.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Dylan. It's good to be here again. Basically, I run channel Superpower Broadcasting over on YouTube as well as Twitch. I do
He's
daily
so
premieres
loud,
to
bro,
YouTube,
his
and I
voice.
do daily live streams.
Hi,
to
I'm
YouTube,
Superpower
Twitch, and Facebook.
Broadcasting.
And I'm a liberal hawk /
What a bassy
unilateralist,
voice,
and
man.
so my primary
He's a
focus is
neocon.
on foreign policy. But
He's a war hawk.
you know, I'm always down to engage in culture war debate. I'm a debate me bro. I do debates regularly, and if you're interested in debating me on any sort of topic, you can send me a DM over on Twitter at Kevin Castley, and we'll schedule a debate over on my channel. And so I'm, excited to be here, and hopefully we have a good debate. So thanks for having me on.
Happy to have you on, Kevin. Okay. This is the last time I'm going to just throw it out. If there's any questions about moderation rules or anything you're confused about, now is the time to ask. Anybody? Nope. Okay. So we're going to go into the first topic. Critical race theory is a topic of all the rage these days as everyone has become sociologists. As people debated across the country, there's two separate narratives forming. So I simply ask to the audience, and of course to the people on here, what is your opinion on critical race theory? Is it a specter haunting America, or is it a legitimate form of academia that deserves respect? We're going to start in the bottom right-hand corner this time with Kevin Castley.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I think in general, I'm somebody where my general stance on this is that when you look at racism, especially if we're talking about American politics and everything, it's very clear that the U.S. does have a history of racism, as well as Canada, where I'm from, as well. However, the problem is, how do you go about addressing both the teaching of racism as well as any sort of holdover legacies of it? And the issue that I have with critical race theory in general is that, as one of the sort of primary perspectives or lenses through which the issue of race relations and
Back in
power is
school,
viewed, is that even the
Grade school, you have
concept
to put
of
your hand up and ask
essentially
to go to the toilet.
objective reality, or that there can be ascertained an objective sort of view in
I like having to put my
in
hand
social
up.
science, that's
No,
put
I'm
into
just kidding.
question. And I think that the issue that a lot of people have generally right now with CRT is that there's a narrative that's generally promoted here, which basically characterizes the ideal that a lot of us would hold of getting to, as I say, like a liberal order where all people have equal dignity, equal rights, equal opportunity, etc. That in itself is put into question, and that in and of itself is seen as somehow racist or somehow white supremacist. And so for me, I would question that notion, as well as I would also point to some of the empirical data that would question a lot of the tenets of CRT, which are kind of just put out there based on anecdotal experience. It's not to necessarily discredit the experience of any individual person, but that within the context of an academic discipline, objectivity has to be one of the core aims. That there has to be an acknowledgement of that. So thank you.
No problem. Now we're going to throw it over to Humanist Report.
Yeah, so I support critical race theory. I think it is a legitimate academic study, and I think it's important because all of the inequalities that exist today, they don't happen in a vacuum. I think that it's important to figure out what the causal mechanisms were, how the history of racism in America impacts, the lives of people of color today. So simply put, I do believe that critical race theory is something that is important. I would say it's not as widespread as conservatives are arguing currently, and I think that they've kind of like broadened the term. And I would like it to be like defined to discuss it and what conservatives mean when they talk about identity and critical race theory, because I think like it's kind of like there's a big ball of things, like this big umbrella, and under critical race theory, they'll put like political correctness, wokeness, and this is like the new extension of that conversation. So I do think it needs to be defined. It's used too broadly, but ultimately the way that I view it is it's just an academic study that really looks at systemic racism. And the way that we can address this from a policy standpoint is to figure out where it's happening, how it's happening, and then introduce policies that fix that. So yeah, I'm for critical race theory.
Wonderful. We're going to throw it over to Joe Lewis.
Yeah, to piggyback on that a little bit, I think people
Our
who
dramatic speech I'd
generally
like to
reject
underrate.
CRT fall within two
No.
groups, which can have overlap.
Best
And for
Disney
me, that's
cosplayer.
social justice
Yeah, I
warriors
definitely
and
would be on
reactionaries.
the contest, man.
So I'm in full support of
I'm the
critical
real
race theory,
Destiny,
and
okay?
I'm more than happy,
Go tell him.
willing to lay out the tenets of CRT, cite sources, and do whatever's required for us
Spam
to
my
have a good
email to
conversation
Destiny's chat. Tell him
and
I'm
work
the
through our
real Destiny.
disagreements on the topic. And yeah, once again, just thanks for having me, Dylan, and I hope everyone on the panel is doing well and making a good conversation.
Wonderful. Now we're going to throw it over to Sprouticus.
So I'm against critical race theory. I think it's making the race, it's reigniting the race war. It's saying that white people have always been and always will be the oppressors, and that black people have always been and always will be the oppressed by the white men. And with that being said, I'm against it. I honestly think that we should follow what Martin Luther King Jr. said when he said that he wanted his kids to be recognized by the content of their character, not the color of their skin. Let's drop the color of their skin, and we don't need to teach it anymore. Let's start looking at the content of the character, and let's address each person as a human, because each white person isn't the same, each black person isn't the same, and to assume so is quite racist on its face. I'll leave it there.
Okay. Next is going to be Hunter Avalon.
Sure. So I'm not really like a huge fan of critical race theory. However, I recognize it for what it is. It is an academic field that can be used for good or it can be used for bad. It can help us learn valuable insights in the world. It can also be sometimes presented in ways that might not be very effective or kind of cringy, like white privilege seminars in corporations or whatever. I think it's really important that we just start with defining what critical race theory is. So critical race theory is simply critical theory, but adding race into the equation. So critical theory looks at how culture, history, and society intersect to create environments and outcomes. I think that most people on this panel and most people listening.
Nice.
He just got yeeted.
He got silenced.
He got silenced. That's the effect of critical race theory.
Critical race theory got me out of here. Can you hear me? What just happened?
You just got yeeted. I have no clue.
Hold on. I apologize for that. My bad. All right, let me get back to what I was saying. I think that we all recognize to one degree or another that we are more or less a product of our environment. And critical theory just looks at how that environment is created. So once we add race to the mix, it's the same thing. It's looking at how history, society, and our culture intersect to create racist outcomes and certain environments. Right. So I think that at the end of the day, we need to just look at what critical race theory is as an academic field, and we can critique ways in which it is presented that might be harmful or ineffective, but we can also recognize the valuable insights that critical race theory has brought us, like examining systemic racism within our criminal justice system.
Wonderful. I'm going to throw it over now to Destiny. Beautiful point.
I wasn't talking to you,
Streamer.
you fucking piece of shit, by the way, Dylan. I was talking to somebody. I was on another panel. They were way cooler than this one, and I was talking to
yeah?
them. Yeah.
bet.
So, anyway, sorry, hold on. I'll be back in a sec, Mindwaves. So I generally support critical race theory because I think that the more tools that we have to view societal problems, the better. I think that having another lens through which we can view problems gives us more insight into those problems. I think instead of like broadly rejecting an academic discipline, which is really weird, I think it makes more sense to quibble over like how does anything get like actually implemented into a curriculum at the end of the day. I think that those are valid discussions, but you just offhandedly hand wave an entire academic field because of weird charges of like they don't believe in data or they tell too many stories or whatever. I think is a pretty anti-scientific approach to any particular scientific or sociological field.
Wonderful. Gonna throw it over to CTV.
Well, critical race theory, right, as I look it up, is loosely unified by two common themes. First, that white supremacy, with its societal and structural racism, exists and maintains power through the law. And second, that transforming the relationship between law and racial power and also achieving racial emancipation and anti-subordination more broadly if possible. Okay, so that's just from Wikipedia.
Yeah,
Now,
blue minute again. Dude, come on, man. I just wanted to
in
get some freaking
practice,
beer.
right, like this being an
Rogue
academic
the
study at the
Owls,
collegiate
dude.
level,
Canceled.
like,
Yes,
okay,
true.
you want to go take an elective that's not going to
Responsible
be able to
use
get
of
you a
your
job at the end
audience.
of the day to be able
Come
to earn
on,
some
man.
money. Feel free. There's a whole
Trying to
lot of
get his
motherfuckers
dog
out there
by
with a
DDGs.
philosophy major that ain't doing shit. Okay, now when it comes to
This will put
to
you
like,
next 3 TS
you know,
right to the moment.
understanding
Nice,
these
Sentry.
things,
Well, thanks for coming
when
and
the
hanging
theory
out.
itself props up that one group of people
Hillbilly
is
alert.
better than another,
True.
right? And it has everything to do with the color of their
No,
skin.
if it was
that's what
hillbilly
the
alert, it
entire
would be a
conversation breaks
hurricane, bro.
down for
Or unless you're
pretty
talking
much
about
anybody that's rationally
unless you're
thinking,
talking
right?
about CTV.
And if you're going to have a genuine conversation with people about some of these things that are going on, then you need to understand more than just the color of people's skin, right? And this is probably where you're going to, at some point, and get your bingo cards out ready for when CTV says the drug war, right? Destiny, I hope you got some education on it since the last time that we talked about it. And that's where we can go with it, right? So get your bingo cards out. We're probably going to be going there.
So fucking stupid,
Wonderful.
bro.
I hope you got that education, Destiny. Gonna throw it over to Destiny 2.
All right, so I'm always excited to see CTV steer a conversation towards the drug war. I'm always in awe at his ability to do this, so I'm ready for this. I'll just give a little MLK quote too. An individual has not started living until they can rise above the narrow confines of individualistic concerns to the broader concerns of all humanity. I thought liberalism kind of had this base covered with the whole like equality before the law. I thought we were kind of headed in that direction. I don't really understand. Like, I understand CRT's purpose as far as like in like the collegiate level. I don't, and even there, it seems like people are taking this and running in a totally different direction than is intended. And then you have people that are just running around with a hammer, thinking everything is a nail, and they're just viewing everything through this lens of like, like everything is race based, and like my car didn't start today, and so somehow I can link that through like all the different levels to like race somehow. So to avoid that kind of shit, I would say let's just keep it in the collegiate scene because that's already happening enough. I understand that it has a purpose. If we're just talking about like bringing more U.S. history to like public schools and stuff, I'm not against that in any way, shape, or form. But if we're literally teaching people, shit like the 8 white identities and stuff, like I don't really see that as being. I don't see any utility to that. So that's it.
Okay. The floor is open. Now, I will not moderate your niceness unless, of course, you violate terms of service or make the panel too off the rails. But remember, just as a personal request, always be nice and make sugar your favorite spice. It is open to the floor.
Yeah, so for the dissenting opinions, can I just lay down the tenets and see where y'all disagree?
Please.
I think that's like a good place to start. Is that okay?
Yes,
I think
please.
it would be a good place to start because there's
All right.
so much vague information,
Sure. So this comes directly. So if you're looking for a place to cite this source, it is coming directly from Critical Race Theory and Introduction. It's by Richard Agato and Gene Stefanik. So point 1, racism is socially constructed and can change how society decides. Again, race is socially constructed and can be changed based on how race decides it to be. Any objections?
Okay.
I can elaborate on that, right? So race and races are products of social thought and relations, not objective, inherent, or fixed. They correspond to no biological or genetic reality. Race are categories that society invents, manipulates, or retires when convenient. And that's directly from the book itself. If you want a page, it's page 7.
I think that
Are you saying that race is not genetic?
Yes. Not objective, inherent, or fixed. They correspond to no biological or genetic reality.
Okay, is logic white?
I don't think
what?
you're.
If race is if race is not genetic, is logic white?
You'd have to elaborate on what you're trying to
Because
ask.
logic has a very fair skin. He's got a very fair skin. So logic is considered black. But underneath that definition, would logic be considered white if it has nothing to do with genetics?
I'm not currently.
All right, let's keep going. Racism is ingrained in
Hold on,
ordinary life.
I'm not currently shilling for the round earthers.
You want to?
Okay, so,
Sure.
yeah, so let's try to stillman this a little bit. So
Sure.
when we say that race, I wouldn't agree with the statement that race has no mapping onto biology whatsoever. Clearly,
Right.
there are skin. So we can't start off on that on that part because half the audience has missed you. Everybody knows
Sure.
what an Asian looks like, what a black person looks like, what a white person looks
Sure.
like. I think that a better argument here, there was an article written a while ago, I should know the name of the lady, about how white is a socially constructed category that's used to exclude other people. I think that when you dive into that argument, it becomes a lot more convincing. So historically, who we
Appreciate
viewed
the
as
Lurk
white
Century also.
has actually been quite malleable over the years. If you look at some of the
Correct.
writings of the founding fathers, for instance, people who were like not Anglo-Saxon weren't considered white. They were called swarthy. Or if you look at when Italians and Irish people came to this country, the whether or not they were incorporated into what America calls white changed slowly over time. So I think that that's like a better framing of that rather than
Sure.
to just say that like race is, whatever. And
Well,
I think
that's why-
an even stronger point to that,
Sure.
for I don't know who brought up like is logic white? A stronger point to that is if you're asking the question, is logic white? You're probably not looking at it from a biological lens. You probably are looking at it through a cultural lens. My guess is that if logic showed up in a little turtle vest and he went to a prep school and he spoke a certain way, you'd be like, oh yeah, that guy's white. But since he does rap and he presents himself in a different way, you'd be like, oh, he can get away with, considering himself whatever. That's like the Steelman.
Right.
version of it. Does
Yeah,
anybody
yeah,
disagree
and
with like
I
that
can- I agree
construction
with
of
that, yeah.
race?
Okay,
Yeah,
but
and-
I don't call Ben Carson white.
To elaborate a little
Ben
bit further
Carson's-
to Destiny's point, right? Like later within that very definition, they elaborate on the very point that Destiny is describing, that people with common origins may share certain physical traits, but these constitute only a small portion of genetic endowments, and they deviate
Right.
from the main observation of the idea of social construction as it relates to race. And like, again, as Destiny laid out, that Italians first started out as non-white over time, and codification through law, that changed over time. But
Right.
again, does
So then
anyone
right there,
disagree with that?
right there is where it breaks down, though, right? Is it completely ignores the biological factors that are associated with race. And if you do that, then
Why are those biological factors important?
why
Word.
would they
People,
be
wait, but
important?
CTV,
I'm doing my
CTV,
best
people
Destiny
with
cosplay.
common origins may share certain physical traits. Do you agree with that statement?
In biological origins, yes. They would share physical traits because that's how the DNA would fucking go together when the sperm and egg meet. Do I need to explain that to you?
No, but you understand that what is
We can
white.
definitely go to a port call that I had back in Port Canaveral for a minute if you want to. When I got
Sure.
to the strip club, it said "Welcome USS Alaska." Right? We can explain that.
But how much weight are you putting the genetic endowment there with the
Well,
common
the
origins?
reality here is that critical race theory, right, would have to be tied to biologics. If it's not, and it's completely societal, right, then it wouldn't be critical race theory. It would be critical culture theory.
That's completely incorrect. It could literally be critical race theory in the context of how race is viewed as a social category
Not
and
if it
how that can
ignores the
impact other
biologics.
people.
Not if it ignores
What
the
bio-
biologics,
what-
which is
what
exactly what,
bio-
you have to
what
do in order to
biology?
prescribe to it.
Can you tell me
So
what
wait,
biology
wait.
specifically?
If we're talking about the difference between critical race theory and critical culture theory, right? So the argument is that race has almost nothing to do with genetics, and almost everything to do with how
my
you present
freaking
yourself and what culture
chat
you
is
grew up
messing
with,
up.
what culture you grew up in. In your definition, you would then have to accept Eminem as black. You would have to
No.
accept it, but no,
No.
yeah, exactly.
There are
Everyone's like,
obviously
no, everyone's like,
differences
no,
between how
Eminem's
people
not
look.
black.
Wait. Hey, one at a time. I need Sprouticus to finish what they're saying, and then people can respond to it.
Okay, because how is Eminem not black? Eminem grew up with black culture. He's still inside of black culture. He raps. He is the white person in black culture. So with what you guys are saying is that
close to the
DNA doesn't matter. It's all about culture. It's all about how you grew up. It's all about how you present yourself. Then you must accept the fact that Eminem is black. But no one here is willing to do that, which puts the fault in your argument.
Zach, you're missing something here very important.
But there's Eminem's not the only example. We can point to Elvis Presley to go even
No, wait, stick to one example. Stick to one example at a time. Don't, let's address that. Hold on. So, really clearly, okay, so if race is socially...
Can we have Joe Louis go first since he was trying to respond?
Okay. Race is socially constructed. However, it can change.
I think we're stopped on like such a weird point right now. Like this doesn't really.
So what is considered white isn't going to be consistent across society generationally. Same thing with black. Same thing with Indian. Same thing with Asian. These things are socially constructed and can change how society decides that to be. And what you're laying out there, Zach, is exactly that phenomena. If I were to really like try to reinforce what you're trying to say there, but
yeah, Destiny. He's frozen. Became too much.
Silenced too. The left is finally getting silenced. Now you guys know what it's like to be a conservative.
Hunter, you wanted to.
I'll just say, like, of course, there are obvious there are physical differences between races, but the argument is more or less that that's all that there is. It's skin deep, and that's it. Of course, there is DNA and biology that plays a role in how everybody looks. No one's disputing that. This whole is Eminem white or black or whatever is completely irrelevant. Like, we're not disputing that. What we're saying, though, is that other than skin color, that's more or less all that it is. For example, if you go to Africa, there's more genetic variance between two Africans than there would be between an African person and someone in Europe. So genetics overall don't really they're not really that significant or relevant here. Race is more or less, the category of race is more or less a social construct.
If it was a social construct, then why is it that I have higher cheekbones? Why is it that my skin?
Do you understand what a social construct is?
I don't think.
Why is it that my hair darkens? Right? Why does it lighten when
I have a really serious question for you.
Because of biology, I realize science, is something that's probably missing in the education. Right?
Good observation, buddy.
It's observation. It's been made, right? And that's what's missing in your education.
So we're gonna have Hunter respond, and we're gonna go to pro streamer Destiny.
No, go ahead. Let him go.
Okay, Destiny.
Okay, so this is very frustrating because none of us actually disagree on this, okay? We need to pick our terms better, okay? So obviously, race must map on to some type of biological reality, okay? Nobody is going to call me black, no matter what kind of arguments I make for private language, okay? Nobody's going to call Eminem black. Nobody's going to call Obama white, right? So we can all acknowledge that it must map on to some sort of reality, right? However, we can also acknowledge that there is a heavy social influence as well. For instance, I could take two siblings born of the same mixed race parents that look completely different. One might be like pretty white and the other might be pretty black. And then I could take two people that are of like, that both look very white with completely separate parents, right? And genetically speaking, the two siblings have way more in common, but we would say that they're totally different races, right? So we can see that there's like a little bit of social constructivism in there too. Do we all agree with that? That like race obviously maps onto some type of phenotype, right? We call certain people white, certain people black, but it's not like so real that it's like, oh, black, 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 white, white, white. These are rigid scientific categories. Like they're pretty malleable, and what we've considered white and black over the years is kind of sort of changed, or at least for white has definitely changed over the years. Do people disagree on that point? Yeah.
White's definitely changed, but what you're talking about with mixed parents, right? Where one sibling can come out completely different than the other. One can come out with fair complexion, one come out with dark complexion, right? That's my whole argument with Logic. Logic was born of mixed parents, right? He came out with a fair complexion, but yet still society majority calls him black. By majority, I can't find anyone who knows who Logic is, knows his raps and stuff like that, that's gonna say that Logic is white. That's a ridiculous statement.
What does Logic affirm himself to be?
We agree with you there, right? That race is heavily socially constructed, right? Because we're looking to the culture there for the indications of his race more so than just looking at him. So it seems like there must be some sort of cultural interplay here to figure out like, well, what race are you? Is all
But
I'm
if we're
saying.
looking to a culture, that brings up my past reference of Eminem. If we're looking to culture, right?
It's not exclusively culture. There's
right, it's not
obviously going to be
exclusively culture,
differences
but
there.
there's a lot of culture. There's a lot of culture in Eminem. There's a lot of black culture in Eminem.
Sure, but does Eminem identify himself as black?
No, he identifies himself as white. But is it all about who? Is it all about what you identify yourself as? Can I grow up in a black community and call myself black? No, I can't. That'd be ridiculous. I'm Italian.
It's probably gonna vary a little bit based on what you look as well. So, like for instance, like Logic looks like he could be a mixed race child. Now, if Logic had like long, straight, flowing, like European white hair and his complexion was a lot more fair, he'd probably have a lot harder time getting with it. I don't know if Logic calls himself black, by the way. I don't know what his stance is on that. In terms of if he actually calls himself black.
He declares himself biracial.
Okay, gotcha. So biracial makes sense, right? Mixed race people
yeah.
can look very different from one end of the spectrum to the other, I think.
Right. Can we go to Tenet 2, or do we want to stay on this a little bit more?
We can move on to Tenet 2.
Sure.
We can move on. We understand where the disagreement is.
Sure. So listen very carefully. I'm going to try my best here. Racism is ingrained in ordinary life and how society operates, which means it cannot be fixed by policies that prioritize color blindness and superficial equality.
Yeah, I don't agree with that.
Okay.
I agree with that.
I don't agree with that.
Yeah.
Okay, so where does the disagreement lie?
I think
Race
it can
doesn't
be
matter
fixed.
to me in my day-to-day life, and that's specifically what you're referencing, right? Is that in day-to-day life, race matters so much that you can't get away from it in your day-to-day life, right?
Racism is ingrained in ordinary life and how
Right.
society operates,
I
which
think that
means
racism
Which is
in and
true.
of itself can be true to individuals, but on the whole as society, right? The closest correlative example that you're going to be able to find is what? Ding, ding, ding! Get your bingo card out. The drug war.
Wait, what?
But that. So
That's
what?
the most
though?
correlative example you're going to be able to find, right?
No, I
really
mean we're
lost you,
still
CC.
coasting off of like a lot of like the redlining and all that shit. Like, so I mean, it's not like a crazy outlandish claim. It's not like the craziest claim to make.
It's not a crazy outlandish claim at all. It's actually a completely reasonable claim, and it's really
Okay,
funny
but-
that
If you're
critically
saying
thinking
it, if you're
Metric
saying it
came in here
specifically in
saying
the terms of like
saying that he
you're,
didn't want people to.
if
Sorry,
if you're just saying it in specifically the terms of like you're like every individual's like day to day, like you going to the grocery store, like yeah. But if we're saying like if you're using it as a broad
Specifically what I'm
statement to
talking
say
about,
that
because that's
like
what
the
Joe
way
said.
society operates.
Which
I'm
how
means
outdated it
not
how
going to say. I'm
society
not going to say
functions,
redlining
right?
has not. I'm not going to say that redlining has not affected the black community. It's definitely affected the black community. I'm not going to say it hasn't. But what Joe Lewis is arguing is that it's a cultural thing and it can't be fixed by policy. I 100%.
He didn't say that.
To be very clear.
Wrong.
To be
Okay.
very
Wrong.
clear.
No, so
it cannot be.
restate what you said.
Racism is
Okay.
racism
Joe,
is
you go
ingrained
first.
in ordinary life and how society operates, which means it cannot be fixed by policies that prioritize color blindness and superficial equality. To
No.
elaborate on that, color blindness or formal conceptions of equality expressed in rules that insist only on treatment should be same across the board, generally approaches and only addresses the most blatant forms of racism. And even within critical race theory, the introduction, which is all where this is coming from, they cite redlining as an example, but they clarify that you can tackle something like redlining, but that might not necessarily solve de facto segregation or the consequences of redlining.
So no,
Exactly.
I disagree with that. I disagree with that almost completely. When I was in the Army, I went through basic training, and we didn't have skin colors. We were all green. That's the color we were. We were all green, right? And so even if basic didn't hammer that home, if you go overseas, I've talked to plenty of veterans that were racist before they joined the military, but when they were paired side by side with their brothers in arms who didn't look like them, they figured out that race was stupid. Why do I hate this person because of the color of his skin? That's absolutely asinine. He just saved my life. Who am I to hate this guy? These are stories that are not hard to find.
Sure.
You can find these all over the place. And so, yes, I believe that policies can make a difference because that's what did make a difference in the
We're not
military, right?
arguing
We were all
against
green.
policies, right? There's not an argument being made against
There is an
policies.
argument against policies.
There's
So
no.
what-
There's an.
so
Are
what
you not hearing it? He
Argument
said
is
policy.
clear.
He said specifically.
Policies like, no. So for
Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
You can no. You can
Yeah.
reread it because I
So,
don't think
again,
he's hearing. us.
Policies that prioritize color blindness and superficial equality. So
Okay.
what you would have to establish is what policy is implemented within the armed services. As example, what
He was
education
green in the army?
is a service member
Yeah, I
given
don't know what.
when they
I'm
go
sorry.
to interact with
was
cultures
I was just
in
pulling up
Iraq?
some notes and stuff.
Even so, I
said
would
we're
actually
over
say
the
that
middle.
that
Yeah,
given
yeah,
to soldiers
I
when they
feel
go to
like-
Iraq is
man.
they're taught the they're
I
taught
feel like Sprout is just
like,
disagreeing
the,
just to disagree
I can't
here,
think
and
of
I
what
don't
the word
really
is,
know
but how you interact
where
with
he's
that
going
culture
with
and
this. I'm
not
sorry.
defend them, right? So in Iraqi, you can't show them the bottom of your shoes
Paul
because
has
to
10
an
foot.
Iraqi that means that they're less than dirt because they can see the bottom of your shoe. That's just something Iraqis believe, and so you just don't show them the bottom of your boot. You sit in ways that the bottom of your boot is in contact with the ground to where no one can see the bottom of your boot. With that being said, the Army does put in policies to institute color blindness. Like I said, in the basic training, we were all green. It might be different for CTV who was in the Navy, but in the Army, we were all green. He might be all blue, but we were all green, okay? And so we were taught to not look at each other's races, to actually look past each other's races and see the human behind it. And that's the only way you're going to get rid of racism, is if we stop looking at the color of each other's skin and see the human behind it. If we can humanize, which is what happens in the military, is that when someone who's racist goes into military, they humanize the person of this other race, right? If we can humanize someone who doesn't look like us, that's how we get past racism.
Sure. So
Hunter.
I understand how it's really easy, right, to say we shouldn't be looking at someone's skin, we should be looking at their character. I agree with that more or less. The problem is that right now there are systems in place that regardless of whether or not we are looking at people's skin, they are delivering disproportionate racist outcomes. A good example of this is the criminal justice system. It's very easy to see that when there are black people compared to similarly situated white people, black people are more likely to get longer sentences. They're more likely to be sentenced to the death penalty. And that goes up even higher if the black person was convicted of killing a white person as opposed to another black person. There are systems in place that are delivering racist outcomes that are negatively harming black people, regardless of the intention of the individuals within that system, right? So that's the key thing with colorblindness here is we can all treat the prisoners the same. We're not going to go up to the black prisoners and call them the N-word, but the way that it kind of goes down, the black person has a higher likelihood of being sentenced to a longer time in prison because of implicit bias and because of the way the system operates, not because of individuals being colorblind or not.
So I disagree. I disagree with your founding.
Sprout, if you would, please, right?
Yeah, go ahead.
This is exactly where everybody get your bingo card out, right? See, redlining is a shit example because redlining is illegal today, right? So the system that you would be trying to get to would be the drug war, especially when they make the difference between crack
I didn't even
cocaine, and I get it. I know you didn't, right? That's why I'm clarifying. So sit there and get some education. That's why I'm trying to tell you right now, okay? Now, so
are you all right, buddy?
Yeah, I'm perfectly fine. Are you listening? You're not listening whenever you're running your mouth. That's how that works.
It's hard.
Right,
I'm sorry.
hold on. I get it. Right, 2 ears, 1 mouth. Operate one at a time. Got it. Cool. Now, crack. When they made the difference between crack and cocaine, and they gave people a longer sentence for crack. Right. The problem there was that crack is what was predominantly being used in black neighborhoods, but cocaine was more the ritzy type of drug, right? For people that were more well off. And who those people happen to be? They happen to be white, right? So that's where you get the difference in the system you're talking about. So it's not implicit.
Right. So
systemic racism.
Wait.
I'm
But
giving you the fucking example, right?
all those people got to the inner city because of redlining, though.
Shut up because Dylan started talking.
Okay, we're gonna have CTV finish. You got about like 20 more seconds, then we're gonna have other people go. Okay.
10-4. Now, so because of that difference, that would be the example that would be most pertinent to what we're talking about right now. So your previous example of redlining, bullshit because it's illegal.
Right, but redlining forced all those black people into those zones, into the inner cities, and kind of like resulted in the whole like that drug war, etc., being more effective.
Right.
I mean, it literally contributed to.
It literally herded them into like certain areas of the cities.
If we're talking about an example that's relevant today, right? The most relevant example would be the drug war.
Okay, cool. So
thank you.
So would you acknowledge then that that's systemic racism?
That went right over his head.
So it's
All
a
right, then.
system that you've just
Well-
acknowledged was put in place with the
No, what I'm
intent to hurt
telling
black
you is
people,
that
but it's
that
not
the
systemic.
I think he's just too
racism.
mad at
So
Hunter.
the system that's in place has these things illegal for this reason. The problem comes in when you have prosecutorial discretion, right, at the officer level and then through the courts, and that allows individual bias to be able to be entered into the system, which is exactly why you want the laws that are in place to be neutral to everyone and apply equally to everyone. And then that's when you get the most fair system possible, when you can remove the most individual bias from the system, which means that you need a limited number of laws that law enforcement has the ability to be able to enforce. That way you keep individual bias out of it.
That's not entirely true because what we saw during Reconstruction was the grandfather clause. So
Nice.
right
Now we're going to go back 150 years in fucking history in order to get back to
No,
today. I'm
because-
going to bring you back in a
because
minute.
it's because history has consequences. Like that's part of what critical race theory and critical theory in general is, right? It's examining how history influences where we are today. We are all a product of our history, and which
Trying
has
to live in
helped
the
to shape
past
our
here.
environment.
So
No, I'm not trying to live in the
so
past. We're trying to
to
move
give you-
on from
to-
problems from the past, my dude.
You have to live,
Right.
like you have to live in the past if it's still
I think I'm in
affecting
the
the
wrong
present.
channel. I thought this was Destiny.
the point of critical
Pause.
race.
It is. I'm
Here's
still
the thing,
Destiny.
talk about-
here's the thing.
I
we
need
went
to-
into judges. We
One
went
at a
into
time.
judges and have
Wait,
judges.
I'm
second.
so lost,
One second.
honestly. I don't
Joe
know.
Lewis,
I'm just
then
like,
Sprout.
this just
Yeah,
feels
so
like...
to explain this is the
We've
best I
gotten
can.
so
The
far off
grandfather
track.
clause on its face is a colorblind, race-neutral policy. But there's context that's needed to be had there. So during Reconstruction, you had what's called the era of disenfranchisement. Within that, you had poll taxes and literacy tests. Literacy tests and poll taxes can have the impact of affecting people who might not know how to read across racial lines. People, poor whites, poor blacks, doesn't matter. However, Southern whites created what's called the grandfather clause, which was an exemption, not an exception. So what that looks like is one could be exempt from taking a literacy test
God,
or
it
a
feels
poll
bad,
test
bro.
if they
What,
could
less
prove
punishment
that
and
one's
less hair?
grandfather
I'll take it.
was able to vote.
Fuck.
Right now, if we had something like the grandfather clause in America, on its face, you could consider that a race-neutral policy. Maybe. But the farther you go back in history, there's going to be a point, especially for Black Americans, where we were not given the right to vote. Even with, it took the 13th Amendment to do that, not the Emancipation Proclamation. So what happened was, what we're seeing here is that we have the legislature making clever ways to create things that are on its face race neutral. The idea that if your grandfather could vote, you can vote, sounds on its face incredibly race neutral. There's nothing it's saying that, like, if you're black or white, it's just, hey, if your grandfather voted, so can you. But it's very unlikely that you would find during Reconstruction an African American whose grandfather could vote. Does that make sense?
So I'm glad we don't have the grandfather clause anymore. I'm glad that doesn't exist anymore. I'm glad we're talking about history. But let's talk about today.
But I'm
Let's
asking
talk
if you
about-
understand.
give me a
I'm
second.
asking you if you
Give me a second. It was
understand.
my time. I'm
what's a race
reclaiming
neutral
my
policy.
time. I'm reclaiming my time. Thank you.
I-
Let's bring
wait.
it back to.
Okay, so I don't know what is that a rule that I implemented, reclaiming of the time. I don't remember. I don't
Well,
know
I
what
mean,
that
I was
is.
being interrupted, so I was just making a statement that I'm still part of
There's
this.
a
Okay,
Twitch
okay,
meme.
just
There's a
as long
Twitch
as you
meme
know
on
that that's
this.
not like an official
There's a
thing, like-
Twitter.
No, it's
There's
not
a
an official
tweet.
thing. I was just
Okay.
trying to get Joe to stop
There's a
interrupting me.
tweet that's relevant here. Okay.
Continue.
Okay. So with that being said, we're going to talk about before all this, there was the judges being brought up. The judges, which I've constantly made this comparison before. I don't think what happens with people getting harsher sentences and people getting lesser sentences matters as much with race as it does with class. Someone in a higher class is going to be able to afford a better lawyer. Look at O.J. Simpson. Okay, someone with a lower class is not going to be able to afford a lawyer, and they're going to need to go with a public defendant, which isn't
Even if
going to
that-
be as apt to be able to protect them from whatever this is. So people who have a worse lawyer are probably going to get a worse sentence, and people who are a better lawyer are probably going to either get off or get a very lenient sentence because their lawyer is extremely good. It's a classist issue.
I have
This
no
is not a
idea,
racist
Demagogue.
issue.
I'm like,
See, these
I'm
problems
trying to
with
follow,
these,
but I'm just so
with these
confused.
studies that you bring up is they don't detect for class. They detect for race, right? They don't put class as a variable they detect for, right? These studies don't do that. It's a classist issue, not a racist issue.
Did the
So
grandfather clause have the racial as an impact disproportionately disenfranchising black people. Let me rephrase
And
it again.
the history of America.
Back, right? If we're
But
gonna
I
look at
really want to
history, let's
address
go
what
all the
this
way
guy
back to
just
the
said.
Portuguese slave trade, right? Where they started rounding people up and then carting them over to the North American continent back before America was even a fucking country, right?
So
how
what-
far do you want to go back with this fucking history? That's kind of like, so you can either address the problem of today and move forward, or you can live in the past. Is exactly
No.
So wait. So we agree that at some point in time, policies have existed. And if we were to look at those policies through a classless lens, the reason why it's bad to do that is because we're missing the full picture. So another example might be after unions were forced to start to desegregate their workers, some unions had policies where it was like, okay, fine. We're not going to segregate all the shitty jobs to the black people and the good jobs to the white people. We're going to let anybody work whatever job they want. However, if you want to move into a good job, you need to have had seniority in a good position already. Now, on its face, like the grandfather clause, there's nothing racist about that. But the problem is that when you go back, well, the only people that weren't allowed to keep those positions or have those higher paid positions or the more qualified positions were black people, right? So, and I think we all agree on this because this is this is a very logically deductive argument. It flows through, it extends naturally, that there might be some policies that are created that have a disproportionate impact on a certain race. And if you go one step back, they basically are racist. But if we don't look at them through a different lens, we completely and totally miss how these things are racist.
Yeah.
That's the only thing that is being said. Now, for people saying that, like, oh, well, it's good that that grandfather clause is gone, or it's good that, you know, unions don't segregate people that way.
I'm trying to figure out how many
that
more
means
tenants
you
there
agree
are.
with looking at things through this lens because you agree that those laws weren't explicitly racist, and you agree that it's good that we got rid of them. But they weren't gotten rid of because they were bad laws on their face. They were gotten rid of because if you look at it through a more racialized lens, you can kind of see that there's another story that's happening in the background that you'd otherwise miss.
I would like to have a law brought up today that we can look at through that lens.
Do what?
I'd like to have a law brought up that it still exists today because each law that's brought up is gone. It's bye. Adios.
Right, but but
what about the drug war?
Inaction
today.
today.
So the thing is that like we're taking like a holistic view of society, so it's never going to be as easy as like this law says that if your ancestors were slaves, you're going to get fucked, right? There's not going to be a law like that. But so here's like an example. Maybe we look at the fact that tax laws are set up in a way. So ProPublica just released a big article about billionaires not paying tax, right? Maybe we look at the fact that, hey, capital is treated very fairly in the tax system compared to income, right? If you have capital and it's appreciating in value, the tax treatment for that is quite different than the tax treatment for income. It's very preferential to own capital. Now, believe it or not, slaves weren't allowed to own capital in the United States, and there's a good deal of wealth that's passed on generationally. So if you look at the perpetual kind of like impoverishment that the black community faces and their inability to transfer generational wealth from one person to another, we can look at this through a million different economic lenses, but it doesn't really make sense to just look at it economically. We kind of have to bring race into it to understand like, oh, okay, well, this might be a reason why black families are struggling. Maybe there is a different reason besides just bad financial planning that black families never recovered from the 2007 housing market crash the way that white families did.
It's not the inability, Destiny, as much as it's not the inability as much as it is, and I'm going to say this anecdotally. It's not as much the inability as it is there's a certain culture in America that wants to stay where they are. They don't want to leave the place where they grew up. In fact, they've got a lot of pride in the place that they grew up. And with that being said, it's going to be hard to be it's going to be harder to prosper in that side of town, right? Whatever side of town that is for you. I don't know. For Indianapolis, it's the east side of town. But with that being said, we do see people that work their way up. We do see these. These aren't anomalies, right? Ben Carson is one of them. He was the first doctor. He was the first brain surgeon to ever separate conjoined twins conjoined at the head. So it's not the inability to work their way up. It's not the inability to pass this generational wealth on.
So what you just said was a really, really good example, right? That everybody in the country generally probably wants to stay about where they grew up at, that people have a big attachment to that. However, because of another policy that we brought up in the past, redlining, there's going to be way different economic opportunities available to different types of people, even if they're making the same choices, right? If a wealthy white person grows up in Beverly Hills and wants to stay there his whole life versus a poor black person living in a shitty part of Oakland wanting to stay there for their entire life, right? They're making the same decision, but the outcomes are so different. And part of the difference in those outcomes was driven by racialized policy. So looking at both of these individual actors through a class lens and saying like, oh, well, you know, this just must be wealthy and poor people and the difference between wealthy and poor people, and that's it. You're missing a big part of the story there for why their outcomes are so different.
See, here's the issue. Right. Here's the issue with that argument, Destiny, is you're looking at it, and what you're not seeing is the difference between equality of opportunity and equality of outcome. There's the same equality of opportunity. There's
in
not
the United States,
okay,
absolutely not. There's
okay,
not. There's not though. You don't
so
like
would you, Sprout? Wait. Would you be okay with like because this is something that I think, and the CTV probably too, because you know we're against like the drug war, et cetera. We want shit to happen, right? Would you be okay with like us doing something in the inner city in Chicago? Wouldn't you like to see something done there, like as far as like infrastructure or some kind of like? Because I think we could agree that there are people that are born there. Like there's 8-year-old kids getting shot because of like gang violence and stuff. Like it's pretty impossible to get out of a situation like that. So
I mean, I would love to see these inner cities changed, and I would love to see them change for the better. That's what I'm trying to do.
Right.
I'm a pastor, so I'm a pastor for a church in the inner city.
So that's where
the city of Indianapolis has completely forgotten about the east side. They don't care about the east side. And typically, if we follow this back, if we look at who's in control in the government for these places, right, you're going to see a very, very large majority be blue, be Democratic. Right, and so then we have to come to ourselves. We have to ask our questions. What are these Democrats missing? Why don't they care about these communities? Like, why aren't they making these
sure? But that's a tangent, right? But that's
we want these communities to be better. What are the Democrats not doing to make these communities better?
But okay,
to bring it back, hold on, Nacho, real quick. So to bring it back, right? Because you brought the tonic to the point. We're only on tenet 2. The racism is ingrained in ordinary life and how society operates, which means it cannot be fixed by policies that prioritize colorblindness and superficial equality. And the more I hear you talk, the more I don't think you disagree with that.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to point at. Like me asking that was the point of that was just to say like, so there is a utility. And that's where like I have mixed feelings on this because I'm trying to figure out what even the positive is of CRT, like what positive argument here for CRT is, because like if we're just talking about like using the tool when it's time to use the tool, like using the hammer when we have a nail versus taking the fucking hammer and beating on everything like it's like everything is a nail, I'm fine with that. Like using the tool when it's time to use the tool is fine. Mm-hmm. But when we're just taking it and running around and beating everything with it, like obviously that's not going to fucking help anything.
Well, yeah, here's the problem. Here's the problem though, which is that it basically assumes here, and then in the assumption that, oh, well, colorblind policies and this sort of thing, they can't fix what's basically defined as a systemic problem. The issue here is that it does essentially boil down to individuals. In other words, unless you were to regulate and mandate everything play out in an exactly specific way, there are going to be individual biases and individual differences that will produce a system that's not entirely homogenous across the board in terms of its outcome. And so it depends on the extent of freedom that you have. And the big problem that I have in a lot of this is that, yeah, there are historically speaking systemic problems that are out there. And, you know, we've gone over some of those here. One that was ignored was the welfare system. I'm surprised that hasn't been brought up. But, you know, I mean, I know that's another subject, but that, I mean, you want to talk about the war on drugs. Well, what about the welfare system in terms of, you know, and that goes.
That's the colorblind policy. Policies within the welfare state are colorblind, but they have racialized outcomes.
But the thing is, the welfare system has obviously had a very negative outcome on poor people in general, but also disproportionately, historically speaking, on Black people within the United States. But the big issue in terms of these
systemic racism,
yeah, in terms of these tenets, though, is that what do you do with that? And so part of the problem is that if you say right off the bat, well, colorblind policies and egalitarianism, formal egalitarianism, whatever you want to call it, doesn't lead to substantive egalitarianism, I would actually disagree with that, because I would say that what you want to do in the long run is to basically correct for individual biases. In other words, the system itself at the moral level, at the values level, is colorblind, and that's the end goal that everybody wants to see. But we still see that in individual interactions there are cases of racism. Sometimes it will go the other way around, but in this case, if we're talking about power dynamics as it relates to Black Americans, it depends on the circumstance. But I think one of the big issues that people take from this is that, well, if you go in an illiberal direction, if you go in a direction that rejects liberalism to provide a solution to individual problems, when you already have a system that at its ideal and at its values is already where we need to be, the problem is that you very clearly run the risk there of going back in time, of bringing in things like reparations, for example. That's one thing that I've seen people in CRT circles basically propose. And now all of a sudden,
that's not true unless you would actually cite. You would have to cite individuals for your argument.
Now you're going in a direction where you're essentially bringing about racial animosity and creating a case in which it's harder to get to a liberal world where everybody does have equal dignity and racism is a thing of the past.
I'm gonna just have to
disagree. Wait, quick. We'll go to Joe, then Destiny, then Hunter. I just thought Joe had a really emotional reaction to that, so I wanted to throw it over to him. Like immediate kind of like.
Yeah. So again, Kevin, in your language, you acknowledge that racism is ingrained in ordinary life, how society operates. And you also acknowledge at the same time that because of that, it cannot be fixed by policies that prioritize colorblindness. And we laid out a bunch of, or superficial equality, and we laid out a myriad of examples here, and of examples of colorblind policies that lead to racialized outcomes. And another one that I'm going to throw into the mix, because Zach asked of a recent law or decision, look no further than Shelby County v. Holder. And that was a Supreme Court justice decision that stripped pre-clearance clause from the Civil Rights Act. And with that had the impact of closing down over 1,000 polling facilities in majority minority districts. So you had a policy that on its face was trying to tackle the idea that maybe we're past racism and we don't need to judge voting laws because maybe they're not discriminatory anymore, because within the argument of the decision, it was so long ago. But even within that, we had racialized outcomes within a Supreme Court justice decision. And because of that decision, that now sets precedent. So any type of voting law that a state that was formerly under preclearance could now have a racialized outcome. And there's no checks and balances for that. That's what preclearance was trying to do.
There's checks and balances for that. There's legislation.
No, because preclearance is gone.
There's legislation. You can legislate it.
Preclearance is gone from the Voting Rights Act.
Destiny?
Yeah, so real quick, all of us agree that not every conclusion, or hope we should all agree with this, not every conclusion that comes from a proponent of critical race theory or any academic theory is going to be something that we can always agree with. There are going to be people that wield critical race theory and make bad conclusions with it and come up with bad ideas with it and say things that are dumb that probably increase racial animosity or the way that we are behaving towards one another in society. Everybody agrees that. But there's a difference between saying like some people make bad arguments using critical race theory versus we should throw the whole thing out because some people make bad arguments with it.
Right.
Well, I just want to be clear here. I'm not advocating for like banning it or whatever. Obviously, if you're in a college or something, you can take whatever courses you want. But the issue that comes into play though is that at the end of the day, people can cherry pick things and people can select particular points in which you can racially code something to provide a narrative of, a racial bias. So a great example of this would be, what happened in terms of Derek Chauvin and George Floyd. That was horrible, but of course it ignores that twice as many whites are killed by cops in the United States. And so, and you never hear their names in the media, for example. And so the problem that we have here is that if you've got thousands of laws, or potentially tens of thousands of laws at the federal level that are all great, then you can point to a couple cases or a couple rulings that you can craft a narrative of systemic level racism. The issue with that is that, well, are we going to abandon the entire liberal project? Are we going to abandon what the end goal that I think hopefully everybody would agree on is where everybody wants to be? just based on, you know, a couple different rulings and whatnot. I mean,
race theory,
I just see that as
LGBTQ
essentially
plus
problematic in the grand scheme of things.
education.
I don't think anybody,
this is kind of the
or
same
it shouldn't be the
thing.
goal to throw out
And
all of
then the
liberalism.
final
I
one
don't think that
is,
should be anybody's goal, but sometimes
That's
you
fine in
need
the
more.
goals in CRT.
If I
Yeah,
if I could just
Dr.
add on.
Fauci emails.
Sorry, go ahead.
Or just two things, real quick.
Finish,
One is that
then
like,
Hunter immediately.
yeah, I don't think anybody's goal is to throw everything out in terms of liberalism. And then secondly, just the not, I don't want to like harp down on like statuses or whatever, but like it is incredibly suspect when anybody starts throwing out absolute figures to say something like twice as many people are killed by the cops as black people. That's just an incredibly silly stat to throw out when we would obviously look at the per capita numbers. There's like 10 times as many, or there's like 6 or 7 times as many white people as black people in society. I don't know why we would ever make a comparison between absolute values. It's just a really nonsense term to throw out to like make a point. I don't know why anybody would do that.
Well, the issue though is that yeah, it's a higher per capita rate for Black Americans, but that also corresponds to Black Americans have a higher encounter rate with police. So when you actually look
That's
at the
great, but you're making a totally
She doesn't
separate.
wanna
That's a
talk
totally
about
separate
politics.
argument now, which might be valid, but that's just
Or me.
totally
That's
different.
actually
I just
not
wanna be-
because like that would just
Hunter,
once
I
again
wanna
play
be
into
better.
systemic racism, right? Wouldn't that once again just like why are black people encountering police more? Because poverty is closely correlated with crime. So why
Well-
are black people in more poverty? Well, because of
But there-
previous historical racist policies, right? So there you have
Hunter,
systemic
Hunter,
racism.
Hunter, there
Why
are
not
there are
something to do
poor
with the drug war?
people but there are poor whites that are
Of
in a
course.
bad circumstance that
Of
don't have
course.
the same run-in rates with police. That at some point you have to
CRT
take
doesn't
into
exclude
account
poor whites.
individual agency, right?
CRT doesn't exclude
That's
poor
not-
whites.
but
Intersectionality still exists within the framework.
If I could also add
But
on to kind of what you were getting at is
dominant
it-
race, Joe.
Wait.
No.
Critically thinking veterans of police.
Wait. Okay.
I've been able to
Hunter,
I've been able to
Hunter,
think
wait,
critically when that guy isn't talking.
Hunter. Shh. Hunter Avalon has waited very patiently, and I want to make sure he has the time to say his piece. Okay. Now
Thank
you
you.
can go.
Thank you, Dylan. I appreciate it. So when we talk about critical race theory trying to like overthrow liberalism or whatever, that's just not true. Actually, critical race theory is unique in within the sort of critical theory field entirely, that it does not wish to abandon the notions of law or legal rights altogether, because they recognize the way in which that some of those laws have benefited people of color as well. And when we talk about this furthering racial animosity and everything else, this kind of worries me because I feel like maybe we're not really understanding the practicality of how critical race theory is applied, right? Because this was something I had to learn about too, and for a long time I was like it's important to clarify that it's not like you walk into a classroom and there's the teacher like, hello, sit down for your critical race theory studies. Like, kids K through 12, they're not even being taught critical race theory. Most of the time, the way critical race theory shows itself in the classroom is either in the way that teachers are trained to better understand a diverse classroom, which would help in lessening racial animosity, and it's used in talking about conversations about systemic racism, which we're having that conversation right now, something that, again, should not be barred from the classroom like a lot of these recent bills are trying to do. So no, I just think that critical race theory, again, it's an academic field. You wouldn't throw out psychology because Freud had some bad ideas. You don't throw out an entire academic field just because sometimes it's used for, dumb ideas.
Well, no, but
And I
there
just
is a
It's not just
difference.
sometimes
No,
it's
but there is
used
a
for dumb
difference.
ideas.
I don't know if it's that bad.
Okay,
I mean,
so
I just think there's a
that's
lot
too
of bad
much.
actors.
Yeah. Yes, I was going to give it to you because you haven't.
Okay,
said much.
Rules. You
Thank you, thank you.
dang.
Just want to
So
wait.
We need bearded nacho
Gotta let me
emo. What- It's
finish.
coming. Okay, I promise.
Just want to
it's
make clear
coming.
to the whole
Right,
round
right,
table.
right.
Okay.
It's me then.
That
Yeah?
when I'm speaking,
Nobody else speaks.
when I'm speaking, nobody
It's not
else
me.
speaks. Okay. Got it. Okay. Continue, Mike.
Okay, sorry, I broke the rules, Dylan.
Theory is based
So
on the
what I
French
just wanted to say
deconstructionism
is
of
that
populism.
to suggest that like
true,
critical
but it's
race
also
theory
comes from almost
is
like
about
Marxism too.
undoing liberalism is
And I think that's
incredibly
what
bad
scares a lot of
faith
people.
and hyperbolic intentionally, I would hope, because the whole goal of looking at race in this way, in this more complex historical way, is to make sure that we make society more equitable. Like, the goal is to live out that
Right,
liberal
a demagogue. I literally have
ideal.
that like in
So
my
you know, it's not a coincidence
it's literally
that black people have more encounters with the police when they're disproportionately socioeconomically disadvantaged, and poor communities of color are policed more. So obviously, statistically, that's going to increase the likelihood that you have an encounter with the police. So I just wanted to
I was going to use this to say, like,
but we kind of moved on.
So why it gets a bad rep. Like, I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with it. Again, like I said, like as long as it's used in the right way.
Why are they police more?
Why? Good question, right? Because I mean, typically in my experience, right, there are phone calls to get made, right, and then the police show up.
We're headed
right?
in a really weird direction.
Right?
Holy,
but there's typically phone calls to get made, and then the police show up, right? So then here's an example. Let's just say that there's an entire generation of kids that grew up without a father in the home because what? Oh, fuck me, we're back on it. The drug war. And then they don't have a role model in the house for them to be able to emulate good behaviors behind, because they're in the jails or the prison industrial complex because the system pulled them out because of this drug law and put them into jail, right?
So systemic racism, right?
No, not we covered that already. I'm glad you're on repeat, right?
Well, I'm asking why it's not systemic racism.
How about this? Wash, then repeat first. So wash first.
Your whole entire shtick seems to be being incredibly smug while saying very stupid things.
Jesus.
So could you maybe try to explain why that's...
Right? So if we're just going to go ahead and just keep talking, I'll just keep talking, right? So then the reality of what I just said is that you have to set the laws up in such a way to remove individual bias. That way, you don't have people using the system, which is the government, which points a gun at everybody and says that you will do X thing, right? Whatever it is, that's what the government is there for. That's why governments are even fucking formed at all, right? Is so that we have a law that says you cannot kill someone else. Because if you do, then the government's going to take care of that problem. If the government was out there to take care of that problem,
Slippery, I kind of feel like that too, but I mean, I think, I don't know, I think it has it has somewhat of a place. Like, even at the very least to study it and say, like, these are the good things in it and these are the stupid things.
To also be taking into account, which is the most egregious violation of civil liberties, which is exactly where this whole conversation actually comes back to, right? And it ain't got a fucking thing to do with race, because then all the impacts of it come down to individual biases with regard to what I've already stated with crack and cocaine, right?
But that was a racial outcome, right? Didn't the drug war fuck up the black community more?
Did you not understand? It's like the words of is coming out of my mouth.
I do apologize. I have a hard time understanding stupid. That is my apology.
I acknowledge that there's
clearly intellectual thought is beyond you, which is why we should probably go back to grade school.
Critical thinking veteran. Every time there's no critical thinking from the guy named critically thinking veteran.
I acknowledge.
You don't understand doesn't mean it's not there.
Wait. Okay. There's multiple people trying to talk at once. Okay, Joe Lewis wants to get in here, and then we're going to look at wrapping this segment up. Everybody will have outros, so if you still have things to say, don't worry. You have a small period of time to say it. Continue.
Yeah, I want to acknowledge that we're only on the second tenet of 6. So do you want to move to a third tenet, and maybe we can hash this out? I can see where the disagreement lies. I'm not exactly sure if, like...
Real quick, honest to God, Joe Lewis... You approaching it in this manner is, I think, the only actual way to have a discussion over critical race theory. And I've said this in debates I've had in the past about this. The problem isn't whether or not people agree or disagree with critical race theory. The idea of looking at something through a different lens or framework, I don't think is controversial to anybody. And in my opinion, most of the disagreements do come down to the fundamental tenets of critical race theory. So I think that going through the fundamental points is actually the most important, because if you don't agree here, you're not going to agree with the framework, obviously, right? So I think that going through these points and trying to hammer them out and finding disagreements here, I think is a good way to do it.
Well, I think Dylan said we're going to end it after you're done. We're going to do closing statements.
Well,
so I don't know if Dylan...
I think one more tenet. We can at least get half of them done. I think one more would make sense. We have time for it.
Yeah. So
one more
for the third tenet, anti-essentialist understandings of racialized groups is vital.
Wait, say that again?
Yeah.
Anti-essentialist understandings of racialized groups is vital. An elaboration of that within the text is that no person has a single, easily stated, unitary identity.
Another way of saying this maybe is when we say anti-essentialist, we're saying that some particular trait isn't essential to the race of a person, which I think is a really good way to analyze that last example that we brought up of
the problem is that
why
you know,
so
due to the tenets and some of the like the literature isn't that bad, but it's
way
like,
more problems with the police
some of
than
it is
white
pretty.
people. Now, liberals will go systemic
that.
racism, and conservatives will go, okay, well, why is that happening? Maybe it's because black people commit
use
more
it
crimes.
in the wrong
That's
ways.
true.
That's
they do per
problem.
capita compared to white people commit more crimes. But run it one step back. Well, why? Is it essential that African Americans are criminal more than white people? Is that just a thing that's like baked into like the biology of an African American? Well, somebody else, CTV brought up, well, it's because there weren't a lot of black fathers in the home. Okay, that's interesting. So now we've got an environmental cause. Why were there less black fathers home than there were white fathers home? Run that back one more time, right? So we're not essentializing some part of a black or a white person, you know? It's an intrinsic part of a white human to be a good academic person and then go on and do a good job, and it's an essential part of a black person to be a criminal. There's probably some cultural aspect at play here that's causing these things to happen. And when we point to negative parts of the black experience, whether it's high amounts of single mother households, whether it's high amounts of poverty, whether it's toxic rap culture, usually these things are rooted back in like real on the books policies that were US codified law that had racialized text, not just outcomes, but racialized text in it as well, which I think is important to acknowledge.
Right.
So, I mean, if that's the case,
though,
where's the what?
Where's the racialized text specifically in the drug war, though? Everything you just said is an example
actually, wasn't the drug war.
I think I don't know what your fascination is with the drug war, but so like very specifically, we can talk about things like redlining. Certain banks ubiquitously, financial institutions would not give loans or allow black people to live in certain parts of certain cities. So we started to get highly racialized cities as a result of like on the books policy for a lot of these financial institutions. That would be an example of like a racialized outcome, or slavery, or segregation. Would be like examples of like I don't know how welfare fits in there, but like the idea that you have like these racialized on the books, not Plessy, Ferguson v. Plessy. What is the word I'm looking for?
Plessy v.
Plessy.
Yeah, the idea that we have separate but equal institutions, right? These were on the books laws that were like codified racism. Plessy, yeah, gotcha.
Right. So that's where specifically, like you asked the question, right? And so you asked the question. This fascination with the drug war, right? It's 50 years of history, right? That we've been living with this drug war since the 1970s, where the federal government decided to pour a lot of money, right, into the enforcement of drugs. And it didn't really take off in the 70s, right? It really took off under the Reagan administration, and it fucking skyrocketed, right, under Clinton. Right. So because of that, and to explain it to you, right, the reason why welfare ties into this is because when you remove the father from the home, right, as the breadwinner, now the mother ends up on the system, right? And then because of that, that's how you create
Fedor.
Institutional welfare that happens because the father was removed the home and now the mother's on the welfare, right? So
you're missing a step, CTV. You're missing two steps, actually.
Oh my God, I realized it when, just goodness. So because of that, right, 50 years of history has gotten us to the point to where we're at now, right? I would argue that, like rap culture that you just said, right, that probably has a lot to do with the drug war in and of itself too, because how are these people going to be able to make a living, right, by whatever means that they can?
Okay.
And then you also, but then you include, right, other policies that actually remove manufacturing from the country and send it overseas, and then you can see how this entire problem with the government and its involvement in the free market starts to compound all of these issues overall.
Sure, just like one or two questions. So you said the drug war, crack versus powder cocaine. One of the big differences between crack and powder cocaine is how expensive one is versus the other. Do you think there might have been a reason why black people had less wealth to buy crack cocaine versus white people having more wealth to buy powder cocaine?
I think it has a lot to do with how it's processed.
Well, no, there's a difference in cost between the two of these. Do you agree with that, or do you disagree with that?
I'm not actually going to my dealer to get that, right? So
okay, well, crack is cheaper than powder cocaine. That's pretty well known by most people, right? So even baked into that right there, even if we do say that crack and powder cocaine are done differently, right? Even that might have like a more racialized history than just the idea of like the laws were done discriminately. Like it might be that like black people have less money to buy different types of recreational drugs versus white people, or it might be the types of drugs available in different neighborhoods are different based on the financial well-being of those neighborhoods as well, right? That's all I'm saying.
So I mean, with
crack cocaine is still cocaine, right? The difference there is how it's processed.
The difference is how it's absorbed by the body. It's two separate drugs that have different impacts.
it's different in how it's administered, because you take the cocaine, right, and you mix it with a little bit of baking soda, you put it in a spoon with some water, right, you heat it up, right, and then you inhale it, right. So that's where the difference is, and that's why they criminalize it differently, and that's why there's a difference between crack and cocaine. If there wasn't a difference, right, in how it's administered or brought into the
drugs
body,
are bad,
or
kids.
how,
Don't do
what its
drugs.
effects is
Nobody
on the
do
body,
drugs. Okay,
nobody would have bothered
please.
doing it, right?
Fucking
Otherwise,
A.
everybody would just
Look,
kept snorting the shit rather than
CTV
inhaling it.
Like the
CTV,
CTV,
are you
I know,
familiar? Real
I know
quick,
we can
Kevin,
get into like the whole drug war and all this kind of stuff, but I think there are so many other factors here. And
I
you know, I
agree.
brought up welfare before as an example,
I
and I
agree.
guess Destiny just wanted to dismiss that, which is kind of funny. But it's like, to me, I also found the dismissal of the rejection or opposition of liberalism to be interesting, because it is one of the sort of main sort of narratives that you hear, is that liberalism is bad, that liberalism won't save you, that liberalism ought to be done away with, that the Enlightenment, that all this kind of stuff that we think of basically constitutes a white supremacist or a white construct, and that there is no universalism. It lends itself to relativism. And I will say, just to get back to the crux of this thing, as it relates to issues that affect the country, or in this case the United States, on an economic level, they don't essentially remove your agency. So within any system, if you go out and murder somebody, for example, you could say, well, you were from a group that had a higher propensity to do that, like whatever race it happens to be, not just black or anything. The problem is, are you then going to basically do apologetics to say, well, you know, they grew up with a certain race? What happens if a white dude goes out and murders somebody, for example? Yeah, they had you know, white privileges that would be defined through like CRT and everything. But the problem is, both people in those cases are guilty of murder. Both. Now you could say, well, maybe somebody grew up in more poverty than the other. Well, a lot of white people grow up in poverty too. And so the issue that we have here is that there is an interplay in culture that comes into it that obviously should be discussed. There's also an interplay in terms of political cooptation that gets discussed. I mean, that's what I talk about with welfare, for example, how if you're somebody that's running on helping people, and that's your job, you get your career or whatever, cushy salary to manage welfare, you want there to be poor people in 4 years so you can get reelected, or so that your party can get reelected. And the problem is, I don't like the crime apologetics that goes into a lot of this. I don't like the idea that, well, just because particular outcomes here, or particular rulings here might have had a biased decision, therefore we remove individual agency. At the end of the day, everybody's responsible for their own actions.
This guy's superpower broadcasting. Yeah, he is Canadian.
Are good, and if anybody disagrees with that, then I would say that they're illiberal or communist or fascist or whatever.
He's a war hawk.
Hey, no,
CTV, you brought up.
Hold on, you address me.
Wait,
right? So we're
okay. Wait, give me a second. CTV, you're gonna be next. I just want to point out that Destiny was so scared of Kevin's rebuke that he fled. So we're gonna throw it over to CTV now.
Base.
I'm still here.
Okay, so like we don't actually disagree with anything, SB, right? So we don't disagree on any of that, right? Individuals are responsible for their own actions, right? The reason why I point to the drug war, though, is because it has had a big fucking impact on our nation, right? Lots of money was poured into the federal level. It basically militarized the police at the same time, and it's created a lot of the problems that we're having today, right? So not to recognize the fact that the drug war was fucking like the pivotal moments in which like the welfare state started fucking blowing up, right? The prison industrial complex started blowing up, and all of these things started having an effect on society as a whole, right? It's important to point those things out because they absolutely did. At the end of the day, though, the individuals are still responsible for their own actions, right? And if you're really trying to say help get people away from that, I would say gets the drug laws and the money behind the enforcement of it to be specifically to the states, and let the states decide that thing. That way there's no federal money at all. And that's why we're also saying, I'd point back to what I said earlier with the laws being small but effective, right? You want the laws and the books, the number of books that are on the laws to be you want them to be enforceable to the point to where they don't actually start disparagingly affecting people or allow individual bias of the cops or the justice system to be able to come into it, right?
What if the intent of the law is
Wait, see, Kevin.
I didn't hear anything you said.
Oh, can you guys hear me? Good.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm good. Okay. So then there's no excuse. Okay. So I speak. No one speaks. Destiny, Kevin did like throw something at you, and then you fled in fear. I just wanted to make sure if you've gotten the courage now, you can respond to it.
Can you give me a quick refresh on the beginning of that? Sorry, my Discord crashed.
Kevin, you can say it again. And Destiny, your camera is off.
Good.
Well, basically what I was getting at was just this idea that, you know, Destiny had dismissed a couple. Well, I'll start with the first one, which was the point about welfare. I was just talking about how welfare is another one of those issues that it has an economic level at the national level, but is also disproportionately affected people that happen to be, you know, in minority communities, and that that's a, you know, it's had an historical issue, but that doesn't necessarily, just because you're against it, or just because you want to reform it, like I do, I prefer negative income tax. Just because you're against these old systems that have existed, and welfare is one that still exists to this day, it doesn't deprive people from their agency. And so no matter what circumstance you grow up in, you're ultimately responsible for your own actions. And that I was basically talking about how to reject that narrative would essentially amount to crime apologetics. And then the second point that I brought up. Yeah.
Okay. So for the first one, so Scalia gives a really good speech in front of some panel in Congress, and he talks about paper rights. And it's such a good distinction between like how has the U.S. experiment survived for so long versus like the USSR. And I think even in that speech, I think Scalia goes on to talk about how the USSR's Bill of Rights was just de facto superior to the United States. They had so many more rights for workers and citizens spelled out specifically in their Bill of Rights and in their Constitution than the United States did. It was just completely just better, full stop. But he goes on to say that rights that exist on paper don't really matter that much. What matters are the institutions that we have to protect those rights. And I think that the same thing can be viewed when we talk about like opportunities in society, or, you know, people like to throw around this word called agency, whatever that means. I think that it's cool to say like in the US, anybody could be anything. That's a cool idea. And to some extent, it is a little true. You know, there are a lot of people that come from phenomenal backgrounds or less than phenomenal backgrounds that have phenomenal outcomes in their lives. However, to just simply say anybody could do anything is such a boring non-point that doesn't really help us fix any problems in society whatsoever. You know, technically, there are people that are born cripples or handicapped or whatever the word is today that can go on to do like certain types of triathlons, but that's not going to be the norm. There are people that are going to be born to families that never go to high school that will go on to become multimillionaires, but that's not going to be the norm. If anybody else here is a parent, there are ways that we raise our children to set them up the best we can in life that disproves everything that we're saying that we think sometimes about agency. You know, conservatives will go on and on and on about like, well, we all have the agency to do whatever we want. Really? Well, why the fuck did you send your kid to a good school? Why the fuck did you tell your wife to help him with their homework? Why the fuck did you, tell your kid you'd pay his way to college even if he couldn't get it? Why do you do all this thing for your kid? He'll just make the right choices, right? He's got agency, right? Why would you baby him so much, right? Because we recognize that while we might have agency to some extent, the most important thing is setting people up in environments where they can make good choices, where they are empowered as much as possible to make the decisions that we want them to make to live like happy, healthy, fulfilling lives. So when somebody says like, well, everybody's got agency, it's like, okay, sure, but that doesn't really get us anywhere. And we know that putting people in certain environments makes them grow up into certain people. And I think that we should acknowledge that. And when we talk about like liberalism or the idea that everybody's opportunity, we do not have equal opportunity in the United States, not equal outcomes. No, I'm not even talking about that. Even equal access to outcomes or equal access to opportunity is something we don't have in the United States. And until we recognize that, like, we're never going to make any steps to fix it.
The false equivocation of the USSR I find hysterical. And before anybody asks me, I'm a liberal. I'm not a fan of Scalia either. So
you brought up the reality.
You missed.
Wait. Okay, so we actually do have to wrap up. We have to wrap up because it's 9:23 and we do need to get to the rest of the topics. So everybody's going to have a short, about 30-second kind of ending to this.
Can I go last because I got to pee really fast, okay?
Sure. We're going to start with Nacho.
Okay. So again, I think this is more important that we just focus on. It seems to me like critical race theory is still a theory. It still belongs in. It has a place, like probably more so in like the collegiate level, because it's very clear that there are a lot of people who are like misusing this and who find like or come across like bits and pieces of it, and they don't fully understand it, and they're just running around using it to like view everything, like saying that everything needs to be viewed through like the lens of racism, critical theory. And I think like critical race theory goes back to like critical theory, which is like based on like the French deconstructionism, which was like popularized by Foucault, and Foucault was a Marxist, so it's really easy for people on the right or like conservatives to like just point all that shit out, or even on the left, like anybody who's just like an opponent of Marxism, to really just point to that and try to debunk the whole thing. I think there are parts of it that we could point to and say like, yeah, this is really dumb, or like this is really useful for us. So it seems like if we're going to be building like a better, like the proper foundation that we want to build for like our future generation, it involves so many other things, and to just start pumping out like a bunch of ignorant young people running around like screaming that, you know, like everything is racist is not going to help us at all. So if there's a place to use this screwdriver to screw in a screw, then fine. And if we're just running around like trying to beat everything with it, then that's not going to do us any good.
Okay, CTV.
There is equality of opportunity, right? The reality, though, is that most people don't want to take advantage of that opportunity. That's why exactly we don't check papers, you know, and citizenship at state lines, right? People can move to where opportunities are, right? And the reality of that is that if there's a manufacturing job in one place, it doesn't mean it's the exact same manufacturing job is going to be in another, right? The wonderful thing about this country is that you have the ability to move over the vast amount of land that we have in order to chase down the opportunity that's right for you. Now, if you choose to stay where you are, well, then you have made that choice. Nobody's telling you that you have to make that choice, right? And anybody would argue like, well, they don't have a car, I think the U.S. will. Well,
I think we're going to be.
God gave you 2 feet
world champs,
for a reason. Baby. If you want something bad enough, you'll go out and get it, and you'll work for it, and you'll earn it through merit. Right?
The reason why I wasn't ready to go first, man.
Cartoonishly stupid argument.
No, Hunter.
Sorry, I didn't realize this was. I'm sorry, I didn't realize this was.
Yeah, I know.
No, Hunter.
You knew that. You fucking knew that because you knew before you left that you were asking for a fucking bathroom break, and you wanted to go last. So because of that, Dylan, it's your panel, of course. I would say you need to go in the fucking proper order now. Fuck, you're going last. How's that?
Hey, Tenflix, thank you for the gifted. I appreciate you.
Is
we're on our way to a hype train
quality of opportunity across the land, and people can go chase that down if they want.
Oh,
so
God.
There's not a perfect system of equality, and there never will be, right? Until perhaps maybe we get to a situation like on Star Wars, where there's an entire planet that's just a city like Coruscant, right?
Memes, man.
Until we get to that point, and there's still rural areas, right? You're going to have differences between urban areas and rural areas, and for that reason alone, is why you need to be able to chase down the opportunity that you want and be able to go get your own.
Dudes?
Okay, so everybody forward. This is supposed to be 30-second closing statements. So we're going to aim for the 30-second mark, and I'm now going to start like timing people. So now we're going to throw it over to Destiny.
Yeah, I think critical race theory is fine. I think that a lot of the arguments that have been made here against critical race theory, unironically, are actually using a racially critical lens to view these problems, which is kind of funny. And I think that it's okay to incorporate this in how we teach people and how we understand problems in society, because it gives us a more holistic view, and it's just another tool we can draw from to have a better understanding of why things happen the way they do.
Okay, Spartacus.
I have an extended period of time considering my name is written down in the notebook.
No, that's not a pre-written rule, but
okay.
But
you can use the first, last, and the next one.
Let me be clear. During your intro to the next topic, you can use that time to talk about this topic if you want to.
Okay.
Okay.
So I disagree with critical race theory. First off, I don't believe that white people are superior to black people. I believe there is the equality of opportunity here in America. It's just whether or not you want to take it, right? So you can find that job, you can find that, you can figure out how to get there, you can Uber, you can take a bus. If you work hard enough, you can figure out how to do it. And so there is the equality of opportunity. You can move your way up. We see that with many people if they're not anomalies, like I brought up Ben Carson. Critical race theory just teaches that white people are inherently evil, and that just needs to be accepted, and that we're inherently suppressing black people. I'm not suppressing black people. I'm not keeping black people down. That is not me. And so for a white liberal to accept this, I guess you guys are keeping black people down. But with that being said, I'll end my closing statement.
Okay.
We could have gone on so
Hunter.
much longer.
Let me unserve and mute Hunter quick. Okay, Hunter. You've been really
apologize again for the interruption there. Yeah, overall, I think critical race theory, it is an academic field. It can be used to give us some valuable insights. It's actually largely because of critical race theory that we're even able to be having these discussions on systemic inequality and everything else. Finally, when you talk about America being a land of opportunity, I would love for that to be the case. But even when you talk about going out and getting jobs, there are studies that show that people with casual black-sounding names are less likely to be hired for jobs compared to their white counterparts with white-sounding names. So even if black people want to go out and work hard and pull themselves up by the bootstraps or whatever, then doesn't always work out. So hope we can address that. Shout out to Critical Race Theory for helping us.
Okay, next is going to be Kevin Castley.
Yeah, so it's been an interesting conversation. I'll just basically conclude by saying that, yeah, individual interactions do occur in which there is a clear racial bias at play, but at the whole, the liberal project, the Enlightenment, etc., and objectivity in academia are all virtues that must be maintained, preserved, and sought after in terms of society at large, as well as at the individual level, and that the illiberalism, if not anti-liberalism, of CRT scholars, and additionally, the what would you call it? The takeaway from or trying to remove colorblindness in favor of racial animosity again is deeply problematic. So thank you.
Okay, now we're going to throw it over to Humanist Report.
Yeah, so I think a lot of the hysteria over critical race theory currently is driven by this fundamental misunderstanding. And the reason why I say that is because I think it was Spartacus who said it was like this idea that all white people are evil. And the reason why there's even hysteria over critical race theory currently, when nobody was talking about this a couple of months ago, is because conservative media, they've been propping up this as a way to distract you from the real conversation we were finally starting to have as a country about race, because of the George Floyd protests that popped up. We were actually talking about systemic racism and the way that, Black Americans are disproportionately killed by police. So to distract from that, there's this new buzzword, critical race theory, and that's essentially what it's become. It's used as a pejorative, and I think that it's not the boogeyman that conservatives want it to be, but they'll move on to something else within like 5 months, and then we'll be arguing that. So yeah.
I don't usually give shout-outs, but Abyssus, thank you so much for the 50 Tier 1 subs. I really appreciate that. Gonna throw that over now to Joe Lewis to close us out before the next topic.
Yeah, I appreciate the conversation around this. We'll let the audience decide whether or not people lined up. Could definitely, within the language of people, says I didn't really see anybody disagreeing too much, but there were a few disagreements. I'm gonna lay out all the tenets in order, just so that we just lay them out for the sake of time. Once again, this comes directly from Critical Race Theory, an introduction by Richard Delgado, and Jane Stefanik. And these are the tenets that are laid out. Tenet 1: race is socially constructed and can change how society decides. So, tenet 2: racism is ingrained in ordinary life and how society operates, which means it cannot be fixed by policies that prioritize colorblindness or superficial equality. Tenet 3: anti-essentialist understandings of racialized groups is vital. Tenet 4: racialization and or racial discrimination are influenced by social economic needs of the dominant society. Tenet 5: because of whom racism benefits, large groups of people will have no interest in supporting or advocating for policy that will help dismantle it. And then finally, Tenet 6.
Wrap it up.
Sorry. Yep. The voices of Black, Indigenous, and people of color can be communicated to people specifically through storytelling to expose and challenge everyday interactions with racism and discrimination.
Okay, now we're going to go into the next topic, and the next topic is going to be LGBTQ plus inclusive education in schools. With recent LGBTQ plus, with it being Pride Month, there's been a lot of programs not only in schools but on television about LGBTQ plus education and representation. And so this has become a hot topic, as if, is this appropriate for children to be learning in schooling programs and in public children's television? Or is this a form of indoctrination or quote-unquote recruitment of the youth? The first person I'm going to throw it to is in the bottom right-hand corner with Kevin Castley.
Yeah, thanks for,
come on.
Having me on again, of course. And so my view on this, it's a little bit different than I think a lot of people might be expecting. I know it's categorized as more on the right side of things, and, that's kind of up for debate. But for me, I'm a big supporter of LGBTQ plus rights. I think that when it comes to education in particular, to have a debate around this is almost nonsensical. Now, I get why we have to do it, and it's good for Dylan for having the debate, but it is kind of weird that we even have to have a debate about it, because it's almost kind of like having a debate about like straight education in schools. It's like, yeah, straight people exist. Everybody by default is aware of that. And in any sort of teaching material and any sort of interaction, it's just going to be assumed straight. So why not have LGBTQ plus people in there as well, because they exist. And so I think one point that is worth consideration here before we go on to the rest of the people is that suicide rates are higher amongst LGBT youth than the regular population. And so it's clear that there's a coding that, oh, you're abnormal. You can't talk about that until you're 18. You can talk about straight sex. You can talk about straight existence if you're under 18. That's not propaganda. But if we talk about these other kids that exist,
you can't talk about that. Oh,
that's
sex.
Propaganda. That's dangerous. It's like, no, what's actually dangerous is demonizing them. And basically, we can see the consequences of that in the disproportionate suicide rate. So thank you.
Okay, now we're going to throw it over to Humanist Report.
Yeah, I agree with everything that you just said, basically. I think that if you teach acceptance at an early age, you could possibly reduce the suicidality among LGBTQ youth. Just being a member of the LGBTQ plus community myself, I contemplated suicide at a very young age because there were no role models. It was demonized. And I think that if I were taught that it was a normal thing, a normal part of life, people being gay was a normal thing, that it would be, it would have been better. I would have developed as, I think, a lot more easily, we should say. But in terms of like the idea that it's recruitment, I've heard this thrown around, and thankfully this argument I've seen a lot less lately. People who think that it's recruitment, they kind of like assume, like there's this implicit assumption with that argument that you can choose to be gay, and that isn't the case. So obviously it's not recruitment. A kid isn't going to be enticed into being gay if they see that LGBTQ plus people exist. They exist. And so I think that we should learn about LGBTQ plus figures and history, and I'm all for it.
Okay. Next is going to be Joe Lewis.
Yeah, just for context, I'm an educator in the school system, right? So just keep that in mind as you navigate my arguments, right? So LGBTQ plus education should be taught in schools. Much like what we saw in the previous conversation about CRT, a broad misunderstanding of a situation can lead to reactionary and reductive perspectives, right? So generally, LGBTQ plus exclusion across all fields within public education is insufficient. As a music teacher, we understand we understand how musicians live and express themselves, and that can help us understand their work. However, what we see, and what I was taught, is that queerness, as an example, is just considered quirkiness in musicians like Benjamin Britten, Francis Poulenc, Peter Tchaikovsky, Leonard Bernstein, and even Franz Schubert, just to name like a few of them. And we never discuss how their lived experience and how they lived may have influenced their work in a deeper way outside of just being quirky, quote unquote. And then like to add another point, LGBTQ plus education tends to be non-existent as it relates to social studies, which tends to only focus on history, with very little regard of humanities and political science, and even with those three together, history, humanities, and political science, as it relates to LGBTQ plus people and just history more broadly. We should work towards making curriculum more inclusive for all people, and that includes LGBTQ plus people. This is a very non-controversial perspective, but we'll see that.
Next, we're going to throw it over to Sprouticus.
Okay. I believe that LGBTQ plus should be taught in schools the same way religion is. And to bring more definition to what I'm saying, I'm gonna tell you how religion is taught in schools. The U.S. Supreme Court protects students' individuals' right to pray, wear religious symbols, and express their religious beliefs at school, yet prohibits such practice if they are perceived as disruptive, discriminatory, or coercive to peers who don't share the same beliefs. I believe that should be a very, very similar scale as to how LGBT is taught in schools. I believe we should teach it that it exists, but if it is disruptive, discriminatory, or coercive, then it needs to be stopped and stopped immediately. I'll end my opening statement with that.
Okay, didn't you want to talk about the last topic with your opening?
Or... Oh, I wanted to ask Joe a question, but I assume that's not allowed in opening statements, so you're good.
Okay, Hunter.
Yeah, of course, I support LGBT education. I think that it's really important. I think that there are, I would just like to read this really quickly, a 2011 national survey of over 8,000 LGBT students found that 85% of them reported frequently or often hearing gay used in a negative way, and 57% heard homophobic remarks from teachers or other school staff. There are even some teachers' manuals that explicitly refer to being gay as like unnatural, or claiming that like AIDS is the consequences of being gay, or so, like really, really just fucked up things, honestly. And when schools are, I'm getting a bad echo from someone.
Yes,
but
TTV, we're getting an echo.
But when schools sort of embrace these practices, it leads to more negative outcomes for LGBT youth. So, for example, research on LGBT youth shows that if they experience victimization, they're more likely to drop out of school. They have lower education aspirations, they have more depression and anxiety, and they have lower self-esteem. So if we want to make the overall environment of school life better for all students, we should obviously work to make that environment more accepting for all students. And that is included in a age-appropriate education on the fact that, yes, LGBT people exist.
Okay, we're going to throw it over to American Nacho.
Yes, I'm kind of like in between Hunter's, I think, and Sprout's position. I think that similar to like CRT, some of the aspects of like the LGBTQ community are like still pretty up in the air as far as like it's not really that fleshed out as far as like how many genders there are, like what all these other different labels are. So some of that stuff, obviously, if it's taught the right way, is fine. Like if you're just going to tack this on to the end of like sex ed and you're just going to say like, oh, by the way, there's also like gay people and like trans people, like, okay, fine. But if you're going to like force teachers to like lay out every single like 39 plus, continuing infinitesimal like genders, then I don't know how that's really going to help them. It's probably going to be pretty confusing and obviously like age appropriate, like, maybe in high school. So that's pretty much it.
Okay. Hunter, somebody is asking for the source on the school textbooks with AIDS. If you could send that to me so I can post it in chat, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah,
and,
sure, I can send you that.
Over to CTV.
Yeah, I think that LGBTQ education needs to be taught at the collegiate level, right? To get more nuance with it. The biological processes for which things operate. I mean, clearly that's part of science, so it should be taught. I think that if we're going to be focusing in on education, I think that education that actually fucking matters to the individual when they're trying to make their way through life should probably be the focus of education. Like, I don't know how to operate a firearm, right? I mean, especially since it's in the Constitution.
It's just,
why is this not being brought
just
up?
Depends. Like, I don't know what exactly this means. I was trying to find.
In your fucking yard.
I forgot to say that.
These are not
I
some
can still
things
say
that in the education system is actually being focused on, but instead we have this hyper focus on LGBTQ plus 18 and below, when in reality what we're trying to do is to get children to learn the basics of fucking life so that they will be best propped up to be able to make their way through not only the world in which we live in, but the systems that we have in place already. So I don't know. I would keep this thing definitely at the collegiate level, besides just these simple biological processes. And I just have to say kudos to Sprout's point. That was a really good point.
Throwing it over to Destiny.
Yeah, anytime you're teaching anything related to sex, you should include all aspects of sex. This includes LGBTQIA plus whatever people. Simple as that.
Okay, there wasn't a ton of disagreement with most of the panelists, and it seems to lie maybe with one or two people. So I just want to make sure that we do our best not to completely dogpile, and I'll do my best to moderate. And if it comes to a more quick, a faster conclusion, then we'll just move on to the next topic. But it is open to the floor.
Destiny, real quick.
Hold on.
Real quick.
Wait. Okay. Whoa. Immediately. Okay. So what I'm going to throw. Okay. So who I'm going to throw it to first is Sprouticus, because he's one of the people that I know immediately disagree with other people. So I'm going to just throw it to Sprout originally, so he can just be a starting point.
So my stance with LGBTQ is that you should be whoever you want to be, right? I don't think that I should be able to.
He said we should teach all aspects of sex. If we're going to teach sex education, you should teach all aspects. So does that mean we should teach
being a white straight Christian male?
So that's what I'm trying to
that shouldn't be stopped either. We all are who we are, and that should just be accepted. But we're talking about LGBTQ education in schools, right? I think it closely goes with religion, right? Because some people believe in this, some people don't, and that mostly falls on religious lines. With that being said, the Supreme Court argument, and I'll read it again just in case you missed it, The Supreme Court argument basically says that it should be allowed, but prohibits such practices if they are perceived as disruptive, discriminatory, or coercive. So if you're going to bring up any LGBTQ policies in schools, and I'm specifically talking K through 12, if you're going to bring up any practices,
you can add in
that are disruptive,
Jim Leahy to that
or
description,
discriminatory
Alpaca.
to the peers of that class, then I don't believe it should be taught. Now, if you're saying, "Hey, gay people exist," and don't hate on Bobby because Bobby likes Johnny, then you know what? Maybe that's something we can talk about. Is Bobby likes Johnny? Don't bully him for it. But that's mainly on the side of bullying, right? We already teach anti-bullying in schools, and so I don't really see a point here. We teach anti-bullying in schools. Just add on LGBTQT plus to that. There's too many letters. Please stop adding to them. I'm tired of trying to memorize a whole new acronym. All right, this is getting annoying. But other than that, let's just take anti-bullying and extrapolate that to them, because again, if it's disruptive, discriminatory, or coercive, it should not be taught.
Look,
Zach, you say something, and then even within your own language, you discriminate. So I don't know where you lie with this. So I'm going to try my very best to walk through this.
How did he discriminate?
He's probably about to explain.
Can he respond?
Yeah, I would like to hear Joe Lewis's explanation before we jump on it.
If I am going to talk about being racially sensitive in schools, I should probably refrain from the words like Negroes or the blacks when I'm talking to African American and black students. With that being said, you failed to just
27.
do LGBTQ+, which is the topic header for this topic. To stop adding more letters is in fact discriminatory, and also is something that as a teacher, we are taught not to do within our core modules for compliance. So what you just described is something that's discriminatory. Do you understand where I'm coming from?
Okay, wait. I need to do something for the chat. So, as permanent Dylan Burns TV fans know, I keep a counter of the use of the term blacks, and we're currently at 27 after 2 weeks. We're not going to count that one because that was talking about other people using that term. So the number's actually going to stay at 26. You may continue. Sprouticus, you can respond.
Okay. So what I said was LGBTQT+, and I kept having problems saying it. I then made a joke about me having problems saying it to stop adding letters to the acronym. There's already a plus. No. There's already a plus there, right? So it already includes whatever letters follow after T. So LGBTQT+. I'm gonna. It's annoying to try and think through that. Okay, you know what I'm saying. And I'm not trying to be discriminatory to whatever letter I skip over, or whatever letter you want. Is there something?
You can use the term queer. You can use the term queer.
Okay, I'll use the term queer from now on. I'll use the term queer from now on. Queer now includes LGBTQT+. Okay, so queer is much easier to say. And so with me having a problem with something that's difficult to say is discriminatory, I find that very, very disingenuous of you, specifically Joe Lewis, because the last time I talked to you, you suggested that all white people ride the short bus. So
that's not, you can go back to the VOD. You can go back to the VOD and watch it. I don't know how you got that inference. So let me walk this through with you again.
Share the clip. I will share the clip where you said that.
What the fuck? What the fuck are we doing right now?
When you talk about,
I am an educator in the school system, and I'm telling you something that I was educated on as part of my mandatory education on understanding the very topic we are talking about. So I am probably the only person, maybe save people in here who are parents, who have a relationship with your damn microaggressions, with the school system. So I'm telling you, as an educator, what you laid out was a microaggression. I'm going to ban all of you, and then I'm going to ban myself. Reason why it was, I gave the context of how I came to that conclusion. So you can deny all you want of what you did. I'm telling you, that's what it was. I can reinforce that. I can give you as much evidence as you need. I don't understand.
But what you said, Joe, right, in reality, right, is all you did was lay out somebody who's completely compliant to the system, doesn't bother critically thinking about the things that they are teaching. Sprout, take it away.
No,
So,
CTV.
with that-
I'm
so
not
with
letting.
that
I'm
being
not
said-
letting you
with that
skirt
being
that
said,
nonsense,
okay, give me a second.
man.
He yielded
Like-
his time to me. He yielded his time to me. So with that being
Come on,
said,
man. Come on.
what you said in the last time I talked to you was extremely discriminatory, and I would argue it's
Where
more than
are
a
we?
it's
Are
more
we-
than
are
it's
we
more than
now
it's more than a
in
microaggression.
Wait. Okay, let's just let Sprouticus say what he's gonna say. Then we'll go to Joe, and then I see Kevin's been wanting to say stuff too.
I would argue it's actually a little bit more than a microaggression. That's just straight up racist. And I called you out on it when it happened. So the fact that you can't remember when it happened or what exactly was said, I made a clip. Go back and watch it. It was on Prime's channel. There's a clip somewhere made by me, and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. With that being said, I missed a few letters, and I got frustrated with myself that I kept missing a few letters, right? LGBTQ+. Okay, with that being said, I missed a few letters. I'm sorry I missed a few letters. It's not a microaggression. I didn't mean to offend anybody. I then promptly apologized that I missed a few letters, and then I made a joke about myself. So whatever you want to say, if you want to keep saying it's a microaggression, keep saying that, but I'm not going to address this anymore. I already apologized about it. I've already corrected myself. I have asked for a new word to say that's a little bit easier, that comes out of the mouth a little bit quicker, right? So I've already apologized. I've already asked for a new word, and this is where we're going to let it be. If you want to keep talking about how I said a microaggression, keep talking about it, but it seems a little ridiculous.
And just to be clear for everybody on the panel, conservatives do know that it is LGBTQIA+.
If
right?
the
You'll
conservatives on the
literally
panel,
just say
wait.
LGBT+.
If the
Like, that's
conservatives
fine.
on the panel need practice, they can practice call me a queer later. I already have it happen enough. So we're gonna go to Joe, Hunter, then Humanist Report.
One of the problems that we have when we talk about this topic, especially in regards with discrimination, there's a vast misunderstanding of things like FERPA, which we might get into.
Right.
And there's also the reaffirming of Title IX. So I'm going to ask you very directly, Sprouticus. How do you
We're going to
feel
Destiny, though.
about the
I don't give
states
a,
that are
this is like
banning
so
trans
dumb.
athletes in schools?
Oh god, we're gonna get so far
that
off
trans
topic.
athletes should not be able to participate in
We're
the
just getting into the
opposite sex-
trans debate.
in the
Like this
opposite
is just
sex sports.
stupid.
There we go. Why?
Because a male athlete, specifically, I'm going to bring it to the male athlete that becomes a female, is going to have an unfair advantage against the females. And now when we talk about this, I am very pro females in their sports. They're going to get scholarships for how well they do in sports, and colleges are going to look at them and go, "You're a really good athlete. I want to give you a scholarship. I want you to play here." The issue is when you bring in males to that topic, or who used to be males, and you bring in male to female transitions into that topic, transgenders, right? So when you bring them into the topic, they are unnaturally superior in certain
you're getting
sports
real
to
close.
females. With that being said, they're going to win more than females are. With that being said, scholarships are going to be offered to them for female sports. With
Can you
that being
point to
said,
evidence
the
here?
females. No, I'm still talking. The females have worked their asses off trying to get to where they are today, to be completely diminished by someone who was a male becoming a female and then playing in those sports is absolutely asinine.
Dude, Pog, seriously, please, guys, start counting. Somebody keep a counter of the with that being said. Okay, we're at least at 13. Okay, we'll start at 13.
Very low spot in the totem pole.
I feel like it's more than that,
To ask
but
you a
I really
question then
want
now,
to. I
Sprout,
really
on
want to. With that
follow-up,
being said, counter.
Why is it that within the legislation that's getting passed, they specifically address trans women and exclude
I love
trans
Zach.
women,
With
but
that being
not
said,
trans
though,
men? Why do you think that is?
we got to get a counter for
Because
this?
trans
Paul.
men don't have
See what
an
I did there?
unequal opportunity in most sports, right? So in most sports, trans people who are women who transition to man don't have the testosterone, don't have the natural human growth
We're
hormones.
getting
that-
so
that
derailed
grow
here.
inside of men, right? So testosterone is a human growth hormone. With that
What if
being
they're
said,
taking
they're
hormones?
not. So what if they're taking hormones? I'd have to dig into studies on
Dude,
how
I
long
guarantee you,
that have
Tenflix,
been-
Hold on,
being
have been-
I can-
saying
I can
13
help
was
you.
being
I can help you.
fair.
In
Okay.
Missouri,
I'm not
Missouri,
Make
gonna
it
take what you say for
14.
sorry.
Here,
In
I'll go back to
Missouri,
you. Hold on.
trans athletes are allowed to compete as long as they are going through hormone therapy. House Bill 391 in Alabama, House Bill 354 in Arkansas, Senate Bill 1028 in Florida. All these legislations directly target trans women exclusively. And I'm laying out to you that trans men are excluded from the legislation. You are saying that there are inherent differences between trans folks, regardless of their gender, whether they're trans women and trans men. So I'm asking you, why are trans men excluded from the legislation when you don't want them to compete at all?
He already answered that question.
I
Did
did
you
answer
listen
that
the first
question.
time?
I answered that question pretty thorough.
You did not answer that question.
He actually did answer the fucking question.
Let me answer the fucking again, okay? Open your fucking ears, Joe, because I'm going to answer this question. All right? Open your fucking ears and get ready to listen. All right? Because trans men have an unnatural advantage to sport. Sorry, trans women. So men to woman. Trans women have an unnatural ability at sports to where they can beat regular women who were born and raised as a woman, who have worked their asses off to get where they are today. Whereas trans men going from woman to man, they don't have that unnatural advantage over a man. So if you want to compete at a lesser advantage or at a disadvantage to who's already there, go ahead. But if you're going to give yourself an advantage, an unrightfully gained advantage over women who have worked their asses off to get scholarships, who have worked their asses off to get championships, they've worked their asses off to try and do what they do, to get that undeserved advantage over them to someone who decided to say that they're a woman, I'm sorry, but that's just asinine. Because liberals constantly talk about how we're feminists, we're pro-woman, but it's until trans. Once trans hops in the discussion, you know what? Fuck the women, right? They don't deserve this spot they got in their team because a trans woman can go in there and can just beat them off the team.
I had to give them
fuck women, we like trans people better. At what point are we going to stop and look at the hypocrisies of this argument?
And if they were the same, why is it that they feel the need to always introduce themselves as trans women instead of women? It's because they understand from the start. It's because they
no one does that.
It's because they understand from the start that there's an inherent difference, right? When the body naturally produces testosterone, right, and then you go to try to manipulate that through science, that's when there is a difference that is being made by science, and it's not happening naturally, and that is exactly where the conversation breaks down here. Do I need to go into the?
Can I ask you a question?
Do I need to go into the emotes?
Look,
I can go into
okay,
the
so
emotes.
Okay, so I'm gonna go down back to the list. It was supposed to be Kevin. But Humanist Reports wants to respond to something directly that CTV just said. Would it be cool to go Humanist then you, Kevin? Would that be okay?
Sure.
Okay,
Yeah.
Humanist,
quick
then Kevin the
question.
Nacho.
Okay, yeah. I do have something more to add, kind of to what Sprouticus was saying later, but I just wanted to ask a question to Critical. If you had to guess, approximately how many trans women have you met that approached you and they're like, "Hi, I'm Veronica. I'm a trans woman." How often has that happened? Just in your experience.
Every single time except for one, and there's been at least 40 different interactions that I've had with trans women.
Now, was the setting social? Were you out at a bar, or was it online where somebody is trans and you're talking about trans issue, but just in daily
to be
conversations? Because for me, I'm someone
every time I
know trans people,
trans person,
and I've never met a trans person who's just automatically "Hey, I'm trans." So I just found it I feel like what you said is weird. So I just wanted to try to
I mean, I can understand why you might think it's weird, right? Because back in the day, it was a whole lot harder for people to just come out and be who they are, right? People are much more accepting as to who they are now, right? So my in-person interactions has been limited to about 10 people, but online has definitely been to about 30, right? So that's where rough numbers is kind of where I'm at with it. That being said, though, right, that one time that I'm talking about though was somebody being disingenuous and they weren't honest from the start.
Oh no, I don't remember that. Oh, actually, I do. Andy Kaufman. Holy Andy Kaufman.
Situation to where if there wasn't already an understood difference, then why would somebody feel the need to hide something?
Hydrate, okay,
right? And they did, and because they did, right, then it introduces a whole different line of thinking when it comes to these two things being the same versus them just being similar, and that's where the conversation is different, right?
They don't have an obligation to come out. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're hiding something. But the reason why I asked that question is because
they do if they're going to be sucking my dick.
Well, that's kind of a different thing.
Exactly, right? It's a different thing.
We're talking about that right now.
What you said, though, you said that there is this assumption in your mind that they know that they're different and unique, which is why they come out. So I just wanted to explore that because it sounded like a weird thing to say. So yeah, you can go to.
Could I elaborate on that? Because of course transgender people understand that they're different. They're not cis, of course. Like trans people are usually very aware of the fact that their biology differs from their gender identity. That is, after all, why trans people suffer from gender dysphoria, right? So no one's denying that trans people think that they are, excuse me. No, well, most trans people do not believe that they are biologically that thing. Like they don't think that their penis magically turns into a vagina. That is, after all, why gender dysphoria exists.
Yeah, so I know I was up next. I had a point that I wanted to address CTV right off of his intro, because CTV mentioned that as far as the education of LGBTQ plus people goes, he said to relegate it to the collegiate level. The problem that I have with this is that we got a 2015 survey from the National Center for Transgender Equality that finds that just by the time, just when we're talking about youths, rather, 40% of transgender people in the United States attempt suicide. So CTV had talked about how, well, why not teach people practical things? In other words, it's not like sex ed is a thing. It's not like teaching about any other issues. Sociology, social studies is a thing. Let's just not talk about this at all in schools for 12 years or whatever. Let's teach them things that matter. Like you said, firearms, for example. Well, here's the problem with that. A lot of those people that do kill themselves, they might use a firearm to do it anyway. So it seems like this concern about what would be most productive of their time is disingenuous and superficial in that sense. And additionally, the same survey found that by the time people were 25, transgender people were 25, which is the time, you know, shortly after most people have done college, 92% had attempted suicide. So I don't get how otherizing people for basically 12 years, or at least doing it implicitly by way of ignoring their existence, is in any way at the end of the day productive. Those same people you apparently are concerned about educating kill themselves. So I'd like an explanation.
Okay, so then this is where we're going to make a correlation here, right? If there are individuals that are identifying themselves, right, their race, by what's between their legs, their sexuality, right? If they're identifying themselves by these characteristics, which are immutable, right? Anybody going to disagree with me at this moment and say that these characteristics that I've just laid out are immutable? Will anybody do that?
You could technically change that.
Okay, so since they're immutable characteristics, if you're choosing to use these things to identify yourself, then you're getting away from what's really most important to you. So the only thing that can be said here is that for individuals that have a preference, right, that is an immutable characteristics, to want to sleep with other people, which in itself would bring it back to sexuality, which is where I definitely do not and will not abide this conversation going 18 and below, because you get directly into pedophilia, right? And I'm so against pedophilia that I definitely have no problem.
Oh, man, he lost it. I don't know what's happening now.
Middle school, high school, are you opposed to that? Are you opposed to that?
I just say earlier. What did I just say earlier, right? The biological process. I know you don't want to listen, right? So, because the biological processes are what they are, meaning that there is a point in which a man reaches an orgasm, and there is a point in which a woman reaches an orgasm, and these are biological processes, right? How to use prophylactic, right? That would be another great example of technology that's been developed in order for you to be able to catch these things. But does it actually matter in the LGBTQI plus community? No, because they're not procreating life. Therefore, it doesn't actually matter. It matters when it comes to disease control, right? So that could be one area in which it can be used, but then you would be sexualizing kids, and that again comes back to the inherent fucking problem when it comes to sexualizing kids.
So
CTV, hold on, Kevin, hold on. I have a question for.
Wait. I want to make sure Kevin gets a response for this, because this is his line of questioning.
Yeah, thank you, Dylan. Yeah, thanks, Dylan. So Dylan Burns, actually here, the moderator of tonight's debate, had a video out recently on his YouTube channel, which I'd suggest everybody go and actually subscribe to. If you're on Twitch and haven't subscribed to my YouTube yet, he did a video highlighting a pastor who would say to the suicide rates that I just presented, basically, Well, that's good. I wish 100% of them would kill themselves. That was basically what this pastor was basically saying. And the thing is, that guy's at least mask off
Even
about it. That
Anderson.
guy's at least honest. And so here's the problem, right? Critically thinking.
The implication there that you think that I would want anybody to don't even fucking make that implication, asshole.
No, hold on, dude.
Take
a stand, dude.
Wait. We gotta let him finish. We don't know if he's gonna make that implication. Let's let him finish.
I think it was already fucking made. You better watch your fucking words.
I'm not saying that you're going in the same direction as the pastor. What I'm saying is that this idea that we should just ignore, anybody's existence that doesn't happen to be this default, straight thing. Because you said, oh yeah, well you can teach reproduction, but because LGBTQ plus people don't reproduce, I guess is what we're going for. Except a lot of those people are like bisexual, for example, in which case they could reproduce within like mainstream sort of sexuality anyway. The fact that you want to ignore it, the fact that you want to obfuscate around it, it basically leads to the conclusion of, well, if we have the data here and we know that people, and this is specifically talking about, transgender people, but if they're at that high of a suicide rate, I mean, we're talking about basically 9 out of 10 by 25 attempt to kill themselves. And your answer is, well, they'd be better off learning how to use firearms. It just seems like basically the implication is the outcome. I'm not saying the intent, but that the outcome of your policy would be, they know how to use guns, they could get it done faster. That kind of
so I'm glad you got such a simple mind on this particular topic, right? So firearms get brought into this because it comes back to the Second Amendment and people's being able, these individuals being able to prevent themselves. That
Wait, what the pog, dude?
Not just
what
people
is
inside
happening?
this specific community, right? So the fact that you're hyper-focusing on this because there's a suicide rate associated, I would point you to the veteran community, which there's a veteran that commits suicide every 28 minutes. You don't seem to be as concerned about that community as you are this community. Fair enough, right? That's where your focus is. Now, I'm fucking talking now. I know you just feel like that you need to interrupt, right? So now, this is where the conversation comes back to 18 and below and sexualizing kids. If you are going to be advocating for sexualizing kids, then there's another word that I've already said so far in this panel that I would use to describe someone that would be trying to sexualize kids.
Oh, bullshit. You're going to try to call me a pedophile here. You're opposed to, by this definition, basically, you'd be opposed to teaching any reproduction.
Well, this video is getting demonetized.
Anybody under the age of 18, because otherwise
you're
sexualizing monitor. No, you didn't. No, you didn't. You
what
didn't.
Are you
I said it's biological processes, right?
Okay.
Yes,
what does that
you're
mean?
Sexualizing
Which
kids.
is science.
Wait. Okay. We're shutting. Okay, we're gonna shut this down for a moment. Good, productive engagement. Everybody's learned a lot. We're gonna move over to Nacho, who's been waiting very patiently to bring us in here.
Thanks. To get back on topic a little bit, because I'm just trying to figure out what I guess, because I was trying to look up examples and it looks like there's only like a few states that are like saying that they're going to need to start implementing this into school. So I don't really know how this would look at, like in the curriculum. But Destiny had said something that that piqued my interest. You said when we're teaching, if we're teaching sex ed, that we should teach all aspects of it. So like could you like clarify? Because obviously I could just take that out of context and be like, oh, well, it means you should teach kink and all this other crazy shit too.
I mean, if you're teaching like how people, it depends on the concept or what class you're talking about. So for instance, if you're teaching a class on sex ed, you should probably cover like common sexual practices and like how to protect yourself, whatever that sex education classroom covers. If you're just teaching like a biology classroom about reproduction, I don't know how much like LGBT stuff would come up in that class.
Right. So that's what I'm trying to figure out. Like what exactly would this even entail? Because it seems like there's really simple, easy things to just tack onto the end of like a sex ed class. Like these are the basic functions, and also like there's some gay people, also there's some trans people. This should be like a little more normal. Like that part you could tack onto the end without getting into like the more nuanced things that really have not been fleshed out at any level yet.
The more nuanced things could literally be like the more nuanced things could literally be like if you engage in anal sex, there's a huge fucking risk of like transmitting sexually transmitted disease. There are some things that pass easier that way. Or like, I mean, it depends on what you're talking about. I mean, it depends on the extent to which that class is educating.
Okay, well, well, so then maybe I could clarify. Hold on, because I want to be clear. Like, there are things like the LGBTQIA plus, like that's the whole part where it just really kind of derails for me, and like I don't really understand anything. Like I do my best to try, but like I don't fucking understand any of that other stuff. So if we're just gonna cover like the main basis, like what you pointed out, Destiny, is like that's something that we can point to, that we have data to support, that we can say like this is a thing.
LGBT is just sexual identities. Anything relating to do with kink is stupid as fuck and has nothing to do with this conversation. This is part of the reason why I don't want it at fucking parades, is because people start to think that kink and LGBT stuff has anything to do with each other. They're total. I'm not screaming at you. Sorry. These are totally separate concepts that should have nothing to do with one another. Anybody that tries to pair kink and LGBT in a conversation is a moron. You should tell them they're a moron. LGBT would just be, and plus would just be like, hey, here are the types of sexual interactions you might have. This is, if it's a sex ed class, this is how you protect yourself. Like understand roughly like this or that, and like that would be the conversation you have. And then like sexual identities, not like, okay guys, like today we're going to talk about the difficulties and like strapping up your harness for your like BDSM kink outfit so that you can have the optimal sexual pleasure with your fellow 14-year-old freshman. Like not those types of conversations.
Hey Nacho, can I ask, following up on your question, can I ask a question to the panel, just to kind of follow up on your question, get everyone's kind of viewpoint on this? Is that okay?
Yeah.
So I want to know by person who agrees that. So I'm gonna take the religion argument that I used, right, and I'm gonna apply it with, instead of religious, I'm gonna put LGBTQ plus, right. So who would disagree with this statement? The U.S. Supreme Court protects students' individual rights to wear LGBTQ plus symbols and express their LGBTQ plus beliefs at school, yet prohibits such practices if they are perceived as disruptive, discriminatory, or coercive to peers who don't share the same beliefs. Does anyone disagree with that? Raise your hand if you disagree with that.
I disagree wholeheartedly with the framing is how you laid it, because it's antithetical to how policies work in the school system. It's antithetical.
LGBT is not a belief, it's an identity. This would be like saying, well, black people at my school makes me uncomfortable, so therefore it's uncomfortable for black people to be there. It's disruption.
That's not it. Christianity is not identity. Okay. I can't identify as a Christian.
No. You're getting something. You're getting something incredibly different. I'm going to help you. I'm going to help you. So there are parts. There's these things in education, because I guess I'm going to just have to fucking show my power level here. There are things in education that are known as identifiers. And identifiers are going to vary different based on how your state interprets FERPA.
You're supposed to just show your power level, not...
So there are certain things that are called directory information. And parents have the right to request that educational institutions do not disclose directory information. However, race, disability, citizenship, gender, to name a few, can never be directory information. However, religion can. So you can, as a parent, disclose to your institution, I do not want my child's religion to be identified as directory information, and there's nothing that the school district can do with that. However, and this is the problem that we're seeing with the trans laws around athleticism, is that gender is considered is not considered directory information. So you cannot, as a parent, protect your child from having that information disclosed. It's just public information. This includes citizenship.
So I'm going to rephrase. So I'm going to rephrase because Joe Lewis seemed to not like the phrasing. All right. So the U.S. Supreme Court protects students' right to wear LGBTQ plus symbols and express the LGBTQ plus identity at school, yet prohibits such practices if they are perceived as disruptive, discriminatory, or coercive to peers who don't share the same identity.
What do you think this means? It sounds like you're trying to say that this would prohibit you from just openly identifying as LGBT, when it sounds like what this law or this ruling has to do is like you wouldn't be able to wear like a giant dildo on your head and say I'm celebrating my gayness.
I think more specifically what it means is
that seems pretty base.
Specifically, what it means is that people can wear the clothes that they choose to wear, right? And if they are in fact LGBTQ, right, that they can absolutely be who they are, right? But when that behavior, right, say like if you're gay, you start hitting on a guy, right, and that guy's like, I'm not with this, right? Leave me the fuck alone, and you persist. That's where the fucking problem comes in.
No. That is
that be sexual harassment?
But this,
That's
no.
what he said, though.
No. That's not. That's a totally different thing. I think the difference we're talking
Oh, it's
about
the
here is that
same thing because he said it was being
No.
disruptive.
That has nothing to do with it. Okay.
We gotta let Destiny. We have to.
He
let
can
Destiny
say
fit.
that it doesn't, but the fact is it's being interpreted differently.
You're talking about something you don't know what you're talking about, CTV.
Joe, okay. Joe, can you hear me? CTV, can you hear me?
I can now.
You can now. What was it before?
Oh, I can hear you, man.
I didn't hear you before that. I didn't hear you before.
Okay, well, okay. Let's just make sure that if we do hear me, that we quiet down. Destiny, please continue.
Yeah, I think this has to do with more protecting the idea that, like, if you want to wear like a headdress or whatever because it's part of your religion, you can do that. But if you want to wear a badge that says "I want all Jewish people to be killed," you can't do that. I think this is what the spirit of this ruling is getting at. It's not like you can't be openly LGBT plus because it's offensive to religious people.
Okay, but so here's the thing, though. So, Destiny, it perceived as disruptive, discriminatory, or coercive to peers who don't share the same identity. What part of that would you disagree with?
It's not a matter of me disagreeing with it. I think you're weaponizing it in a way that it's not meant to. So,
I'm not
for instance,
weaponizing it. What I'm saying is that LGBTQ plus should be taught in schools. They should be taught that, you know what, there are gay people. I'm specifically talking K through 12. Collegiate education. You can decide what you want. You can decide what school you go to. You can decide what classes you attend. So teach that in collegiate education if you want to. But I'm specifically talking K through 12 schools where kids are required to go through these schools for the most part. I think you could drop out of school
yeah, but like, why do you keep bringing up this particular thing?
I'm bringing this up because I think it should be taught. I think it should be taught as there are gay people, not to bully them, let them be them. I don't think we should discriminate on gay people in school, or LGBTQ plus. So I don't think we should discriminate based off just the identity of these people. And so with that being
everyone agrees with that, but why do you keep bringing up this particular thing over and over again?
Because that's how we handle. That's how we currently handle religion. That's the current ruling.
That's how we currently handle religion. Right. That's how I think we should handle LGBT.
What is the point of bringing it up?
Because
you're bringing this up and then you're saying that everyone on the panel agrees with. What are you bringing this up for?
Because that's how he views.
Disagrees, and there was 3 people that disagreed.
Yes,
because it sounds like you're trying to bring this up and use this in contrary to people teaching LGBTI whatever stuff in school.
I said that LGBTQ plus education should be taught in schools, so that way gay people aren't bullied and stuff like that. And I specifically said that. Now this is where I draw the line. This is how religion is taught in schools. This is how I think LGBTQ plus should be taught in schools. So with that being said, this is my point. I'm allowed to spread my point, Destiny. And there's 3 people that disagree with that, and I don't believe your hand was raised when I asked if anyone disagreed.
Okay,
Spartacus. So the problem here is, and this is why dude,
where's the "with that being said" counter?
Is that you don't know what Title IX is, and it's very clear in your language. You don't know what Title IX is. So I'm going to help you because the Department of Education has enforcement mechanisms for things like discrimination. Title IX prohibits recipients of federal financial assistance from discriminating based on sexual orientation and gender identity in their education programs and activities. The department also concluded, for the reasons described under the Supreme Court ruling, which escapes me right now, Bostock v. Clayton County, that it extends to students, right? So initially within that ruling, it was just in terms of workers when it comes to sexual orientation and gender identity. However, the Department of Education affirms that this can extend to students. So what the reason why I'm very frustrated in this right now is that Title IX protects trans folks, trans students particularly. You described earlier that you want to discriminate against trans students in regards to athletics, which is in a direct contradiction to Title IX. And then you're laying out this thing about religion and a correlation between religion and how religion is taught in schools versus how LGBTQ plus education is taught in schools. But unfortunately, you don't have any evidence of LGBTQ plus education taught in schools because in most curriculums, it doesn't exist. So the issue I'm having here is that you're conflating a discrimination issue with an education issue. And as a teacher, it just is driving me up a wall. And I want to have a better conversation about this, but if we don't know like what the protections are for LGBTQ plus students and how that relates with discrimination and how that's different than the education, then I don't know what the fuck you're talking about.
right, so
I'll repeat my stance. I'll repeat my stance because evidently people can't fucking listen. It's been 2 times that Joe Lewis couldn't fucking open his ears and hear my fucking stance. So I'm going to repeat it a 3rd time, all right? This has not been the first time, Joe Lewis, that you haven't been able to hear my stance that I've so obviously obfuscated, okay? So I believe that LGBTQ plus education should be taught in schools, but should be prohibited when it is perceived as disruptive, discriminatory, or coercive to peers who don't share the same identity.
Huge problem right here. Massive issue. You just said that.
Okay, so, Joe, we're going to go Joe, Hunter, then Kevin, and then we're going to wrap the topic up.
Your problem here doesn't exist in academia in K through 12. And I'm more than happy to walk through with you off stream where the disconnection is because I can clearly see it. But right now, you are not equipped to talk about this right now. So we're going to keep running into this circle, right? There's Title IX protections for trans students, and the Department of Education affirmed that this very week. So the thing that you're talking about doesn't exist within education curriculum. And in terms of like the expression of like if things are coercive or discriminatory, that already exists within Title IX, but then you're trying to conflate it within religion, but religion is protected within the school, within the education system. Every state does it from a different varying degree. So that thing that you're worried about in terms of religious expression already exists. But the problem is we have religious protections for students already. And this is why it frustrates me because you don't know about those religious protections that exist within schools unless you can articulate them.
I think the guys are like talking past each other at this point. I don't think he's saying that these discriminations exist yet, but if we're going to go down the path of like we should teach this in schools, that this is the way that we should handle it.
Right,
sure,
and that's
but to be clear,
And if that's the case, then that would be a huge problem because what he's saying is basically that you shouldn't be able to teach LGBT stuff if people perceive it as being disruptive.
Well, it could be reworded.
What if someone perceives
he just repurposed the existing ruling, but
right. And yeah, and I mean, what if someone perceives black people as making them uncomfortable or being disruptive? We don't make decisions like this. You are making a really bizarre comparison also. And as Joe pointed out, Title IX already protects LGBT people, so we don't need this weird religious comparison that you keep trying to make.
All right, so I got a question,
right? No, hold on.
No, official question. What was the official ruling on Title IX's protections for trans athletes?
So I can lay it out for you. I can lay it out for you. I'll read it.
But then we're going to Kevin, and then we're wrapping it up.
Sure thing. Give me 1 second. Because something that I do for panels is I take notes. Title IX provides with certain exceptions.
Yeah, you're gonna have to watch the VOD for sure. I'm gonna post this. I'm gonna be posting this to YouTube like as quickly as I possibly can.
Subjected to
so make sure you're
under any
subbed over
education
there
programs
so
or activity
catch it on
receiving
there
federal financial assistance. I want to make that exception because the only
of course
exception that exists with
Destiny
this.
and
verbatim
Dylan will
from the
also be
decision,
posting it, I'm sure,
after reviewing the text of Title IX and federal court interpretation of Title IX, the department has concluded that the same clarity exists for Title IX. That is, Title IX prohibits recipients of federal financial assistance from discriminating based on sexual orientation and gender identity in their education programs and activities. The department has concluded for the reasons described in the notice that, to the extent the interpretation may exist, this is the best interpretation of the statute. So there's a
Which
whole
is
thing
entirely different than what Sprout's been saying this entire time when he's based his entire argument around biological sex.
Right, but the
Thank
problem
you for making my point.
No. But the problem is gender and sex are separate in education. They're not the same. It's going to vary from state to state, right?
You
and how
keep referencing Title IX, right?
No.
Title IX just told you that they were different.
No, because the problem is we still have gaps in there, which I described when I was talking about FERPA, specifically within FERPA.
So how is that Sprout's fucking fault whenever he's been arguing from a point of biological sex?
Because sex and gender are separate under the statute. Sex and gender are separate under the statute, but some states do their interpretation of directory information, which is personally identifiable information that is not generally considered harmful or an invasion of privacy if disclosed. Gender exists outside of that directory information. So states can create laws that discriminate against trans folks. Why is that? Because every state has a different interpretation. As example, in California, a transgender or Gender nonconforming student may not express their gender identity openly in all contexts, including home. Therefore, revealing a student's gender identity or expression to others may compromise the student's safety. So even within that California statute, there is a direct contradiction with the definition of directory information. So right now, with me as a fucking teacher, there's a direct contradiction with what currently exists, which is an old statute of directory information, and what currently exists in 2021. So over time, states are adjusting and clarifying. However, thankfully, because of FERPA, there's some things that you can do to make sure that things can be affirmed. However,
oh yeah, true. I keep forgetting. I'm literally about to ask him.
Around every loophole and use women as their things of protection when it's very, very clear in the law that the laws directly target trans women, but do not target trans men. Trans men, under a vast majority of these laws, can still compete in sports, but trans women cannot, and they use cis women as the shield to discriminate exclusively
don't bite
to trans
this.
women.
CTV and Sprout, please,
disgusting.
God.
And you just trample
Okay,
over
no,
cis
bite
women.
this.
Okay, no,
bait.
God. Okay, we're going to Kevin now because we have to wrap up the topic.
Yeah. Thanks, Dylan. I had a couple points because Sprouticus had asked, and I disagreed with what he brought up, basically. And I got a couple points here about that. The first one is basically kind of what Hunter alluded to, which is that
there's still one more topic.
Somebody who is offended or takes issue with the existence or the promotion or the outward existence of LGBTQ plus people, I could just say, oh, this is an infringement of my religious rights, for example. And that argument has been made many times in the past. I've seen people like Michelle Bachmann make that argument, for example, back in the day. I'm sure you can find a lot of contemporary people that are making this kind of argument, but she just came to mind. That's very problematic because it lends itself to, as actually what Destiny pointed out, was a weaponization of a concept which is mostly non-controversial for nefarious ends. And the second point that I would bring up, which is that I don't even agree with this. Like, I love the United States. I call the United States the vanguard of liberty and everything. But when it comes to the American Constitution, it's not perfect. And the relationship, the dynamic of religion and secularity in the American Constitution, as I see it, is kind of problematic. I'm more a fan of the French concept of laïcité, basically, which is this idea of freedom from religion. I wouldn't even agree with the Supreme Court's ruling there because the idea of it lends itself to religious apologia. And of course, that lends itself, of course, getting back to this issue, to basically bigotry against gay people, women, etc. I find it very interesting that social conservatives, and in particular, religious conservatives, are now all of a sudden rushing to defend, shocked and chagrined about women and young women in athletics. It's like, okay, but your guys' doctrine literally teaches that women should not be in any sort of position of lecturing power, etc. You can look at what is it? First Timothy. No. So anti-theism or GTFO. Thank you.
Okay, we have to wrap up. We're gonna do ending statements. If you want to say something, do it in 30 seconds. We're starting with Nacho.
I think I muted myself instead of unmuted. Yeah, so the whole, like, we could just say, like, I perceive this as disruptive. It's like kind of like debunked in the own hypothetical because you're just pointing out that just like Black Americans, trans people are already a protected class. So like that obviously wouldn't be the case. I also I teach music. I help with my the band camp at my school. Like, we had a situation where we go, and anecdote Andy here, where all of these girls were put in a cabin. They were all like lesbian or like trans, whatever. And there was like 1 or 2 girls that were in the cabin during band camp that were straight. And the girls were like joking around, and they were like, oh, by the end of this camp, all the girls in this cabin are going to be gay or trans. So the girls text their parents, and the parents call the instructors, and then we have to go fucking deal with this shit. Like, obviously, that's fucking disruptive. So, like, obviously, this isn't going to fucking happen all the way through the whole thing. Like, but to just say, like, there's nothing that can be disruptive about this, like, that's not true either. So, again, I'm going to stick this in the same envelope that I did the first topic. Like, we can use this, like, you can teach these things, but like when it gets into the more, like, it gets into the weeded areas that really aren't fleshed out yet, I think we should just leave that to the experts or to those that are studying that until it's more developed, and then we can maybe try to introduce those things.
Okay,
that's it.
Next is going to be CTV.
So what you've been seeing here from those arguing on the left side is a complete, just asinine trying to fucking understand terms. They've completely taken Sprout completely out of context of what he's trying to talk about, right? He's defined these things along the lines of sex, which are male and female, right? And the Supreme Court, from everything that Joe read, definitely understands it along those lines, which is why they bothered even making the fucking delineation between gender, right? So because of that, right, if states choose that they want their education system to be based around the biological, right, instead of the social, right, then they are free to do that. And why would they not be? Right? If they want to have it based in science rather than social constructs, because that's what's going to serve their constituents more over time, then they absolutely have a right to do that. That's it.
Okay, next we're going to throw it over to Destiny.
I'm not even sure what the fuck the conversation is at right now. I still support LGBTQ stuff being taught in schools. I don't support lesbian girls turning all the other girls at band camp into lesbians. Yeah, that's my position.
Okay. Next, we're going to throw it over to Hunter Avalon.
Yeah. This conversation really did kind of get off the rails, but still, yeah, it seems that LGBT in education does seem to have a net benefit for LGBT students and for non-LGBT students, just helping them learn how to be more accepting, reduces bullying, and overall makes the whole educational process for LGBT individuals significantly better. I think that that's really important for creating productive members of society. So, yeah, I still support LGBT being taught in schools.
Billy Ellis, thanks for the follow, man. Appreciate that.
Okay.
Oh my god.
Sprout.
All right. Joe Lewis, just admit you.
Why are you trying to look like a dog for Destiny?
Women,
I'm the real Destiny, okay?
I
am Mextiny, okay? I'm the Mexican Destiny, okay?
That cis women just get thrown into the bus. They take the bus for this one, right?
I'm the real one. If you're gonna shoot one, shoot him in a video game.
Education.
Okay, like in the scene. We gotta rescue somebody.
I said that it was again.
I'm the real one. Just remember that.
If it is disruptive, discriminatory, or coercive. With that being said, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. There's been a couple people that disagree with me on this panel, and I don't know why. If you think that disruptive, discriminatory, coercive is too broad, then I guess let me know. But I really don't think it is. That's where I'm gonna lay my stake. Go ahead. I'm done.
I like steak.
I'm gonna throw it over to Joe.
Yeah, so I guess for Sproutacus's perspective is LGBTQ plus people, if they're in the school, education is fine. But when it comes to extracurricular activities, which still fall under education, fuck them. So you're a fucking hypocrite and don't know shit. So with that being said, I'm going to give you some things that you can read so you can understand this more. Specifically, FERPA, the Family Education Rights and Privacy Act. Specifically within FERPA, if you really want to boil the points down so you can okay, where are the dissonants? Like what the fuck was Joe talking about? Right? I talked about identifiable information. I talked about personal identifiable information. I talked about directory information. And there's also a bunch of other things within FERPA around students' educational records.
Read shit. That's my closing statement.
On, and I would love to walk you through that. But the problem is the difference between you and me.
I don't know.
I have a teacher certification and you don't. So unfortunately, I get this great education that's part of my profession. So I have to know these things. So as a layman person, maybe go to the Board of Ed if you really want to support cis women and support them. Because I know you don't show up at Board of Ed meetings because you don't do shit in local politics.
Actually, I do.
Stay being a pastor, okay?
Okay,
stick with that.
Throw it over to
what?
Yeah.
Look at Joe.
What is happening? I let Sproutacus say the quick thing because I was like, okay, whatever, it was quick. But let's not make that a thing where at the end of it you go like, fuck you, screw you, fucking start throwing like water bottles at each other.
You're gonna speak condescendingly to people.
He can be condescending, okay? He can be condescending. He's allowed to be, okay? Everybody, I mean, Sproutacus's whole statement was Joe Lewis hates women and throws them under the bus, okay? If he can do that, then Joe Lewis can do the same thing, okay? Anyway.
Much for the tolerant liberals, huh?
Yeah. So
just say my jabs are better. Just say my jabs are better. That's an easier thing to use.
Okay. Humanist Report, please finish.
I don't know how you people do this every week. This is exhausting. So that conversation went off the rails. I still agree that yes, we should teach LGBTQ plus education in schools, K through 12. And I think that really, before it got off track,
I know, dude, like literally.
I think, is it Kevin said at the beginning, was a really great start. And that's kind of where we should have explored. So yes, I still very much support it.
Okay. I'm gonna throw it over to Kevin Castley.
What he's doing.
Yeah, thanks, Dylan.
Thanks for the follow.
So,
Appreciate
yeah,
you.
no, it's been an interesting panel, and
wait a minute.
It kind of shows you the diversity in politics because we got people that would otherwise disagree on stuff. Like I know I agreed with CTV on some stuff in the last segment.
Does anyone know
had some
what
issues
I mean
on other parts, but on this one, it was pretty clear. I mean, this is a matter of life or death as it relates to specifically.
I know what you mean.
Talked about transgender people, but LGBT people at large have
that
a higher
because he said
suicide
that.
rate before they even enter college. So this whole thing, save for college,
good,
it's like what they're dead
appreciate
before
it.
then. That was the point that I brought up. And the second point,
By the way,
just
I
like to
think
acknowledge,
we've
it's
missed a
interesting.
couple.
We can find some common ground with people that I normally kind of disagree
with that being
so,
said,
for example,
in the
like Mike,
counter,
I've
just
covered
saying.
Mike, and it's good to have some agreement here because I disagreed with some of your takes on foreign policy, and we covered them on my show Google Gang Rising with Spooky Nuki. So over on Superpower Broadcasting. But it's good to have some agreement now and then. I'm not actually counter to what CTV said, like basically like a leftist or whatever. I'm kind of a center to center right liberal. So, but I care about LGBT existence, and this is a matter of life or death for them. So thank you.
Okay.
It's a matter of
So,
life
we're gonna go
and
to the
death.
last topic,
Okay,
which is
that's a stretch.
Fauci's emails. Is Fauci's emails a legitimate story that Americans should be concerned about when it comes to the integrity of a man who is the voice of public health, or is it just basically a big spooky ghost that people are propping up? Is it a legitimate concern that people should look into, or is it nothing at all? We're gonna start with Kevin Castley.
Yeah, thanks. So I know in terms of the general sort of narrative around the Fauci emails, it's kind of been in this sort of, I mean, I've seen what a lot of basically more or less conservative media has reported on it, and it's basically kind of cascaded him and characterized him as essentially a liar, as essentially somebody trying to mislead the public. I don't really get that impression from Fauci so much. What I get the impression from Fauci is that, yeah, at the end of the day, things developed, people's view on how to respond to social distancing, mask wearing, etc. Changed as the pandemic went on, and as it's been brought to light fairly recently as well. There's potentiality there that it might have come from a lab in China. I think what ultimately matters, though, at the end of this, which is that if it turned out to have come from a lab in China, covered it up, or if it turned out to be an organic thing that came from a wet market.
This doesn't matter.
And we know from the emails
Just give
that
me
there
a
was
minute.
speculation
We'll find a way to work it out.
Part of it kind of looks like it might have been engineered. I
guys
actually
are
think
trolls,
it's
man.
materially
You guys are
irrelevant
actually
to how
trolls.
we handle communist China, because we know that they treated this just like
Can I
Chernobyl.
wait till
that they
later? Like, I want to
essentially
have a
tried to cover it
productive
up. They arrested
conversation.
Dr. Lee. They
I'm gonna
silenced
get-
anybody. They accused people of spreading rumors. The medical professionals in communist China that tried to
God.
initially sound the alarm on this. And so whether it was an accidental escape from a lab, or even if it was a purposeful escape from a lab, or if it was just a natural sort of thing, China needs to be held to the same account. And as far as American medical professionals, Fauci's colleagues, as well as him himself, nobody's
this out.
perfect.
We'll figure
And,
out-
yeah,
we're
science
gonna
changes,
slip
and
it in, okay?
Fauci's changed as
I'll know when
as
it's time. Yeah, you're right.
increased
Yeah,
data
yeah.
has been brought to light in terms of, people thought initially the masks weren't so effective, and then that changed, and obviously the pandemic got a lot worse, and so you needed to take measures to contain it. And so people can change their minds, right? It doesn't necessarily make them nefarious. So thank you.
Okay, I'll throw it over to Humanist Report.
Yeah, so I don't necessarily see much controversy with the emails. I think that criticisms of Dr. Fauci or any public official are perfectly fine and valid. I don't necessarily know what the point of the emails are. I know that I believe it was BuzzFeed that obtained them originally. But if the goal is to undermine the message of public health officials, then I would disagree with that. But overall, I just feel like the emails themselves don't really tell us anything that we didn't already know. It wasn't necessarily any gigantic revelation. I just felt like it was a nothing burger, as I said.
Okay, we're going to throw it over to Joe Lewis.
He means on the global scale.
Yeah, I think
but
this
not an
topic is
American
very
political
interesting.
scale.
If I believe that it
I don't know what he is, dude. I don't think he knows what he is
very
either. I know for
unlikely
sure he's a
for
war hawk.
reactionaries
So.
and social justice warriors
Someone
to
time at
read,
band camp
I can accept that
asked the
people
question
probably did not read over 3,000 pages of emails. However, I actually know an individual who did. His name is Feline Father. So what Feline Father did was he took all these emails and put it into a Dr. Fauci timeline. I'm going to send over to Dylan Burns. And the reason why I'm sending this over to Dylan Burns to share within his community and the community more broadly speaking is that when we're talking about these emails, it's very important for us to understand the context of every single email if you're going to want to have any type of decent analysis of what we're talking about here. What that looks like is there's probably going to be a couple of emails that you can just throw away of him asking, like, can I get more information on this? Well, thanks for this nice reply. Here's a general recommendation about COVID. Have a good day. But we might have some, which Feline Father points out very directly in his timeline, that there are some emails that are kind of like smoking misinformation guns that lead to poor conclusions because it lacks context. So my fear in this conversation is that we are going to have somebody cite an email out of context, use that for the core of their argument, and then basically die on that hill. And then if I also believe and that people have no desire or really monetary interest to relinquish certain opinions on panels, those who are dissenting and think that Fauci is the boogeyman are just going to die on that hill. However, I think what we can do, because we have the time, is challenge the misinformation. So I'm ready to challenge the misinformation. I have the Fauci timeline. I have the emails up, all 3,000 pages of it. So I have Control F on my browser. So let's fucking party. Okay.
Can you drop that in the group message?
Yeah.
Please?
Could you also drop that in my chat?
I got you. Okay.
Thank you.
Do
I'm going to throw it over to Sprouticus.
I've also got the 3,000 emails up. I have it in a
shit!
PDF. Preparing for this debate. So the things that there's a lot of stuff I don't see wrong with Fauci's emails. Besides, he was just a dick to most people. If you just look at his replies, they were very dickish. But with that being said, is that Fauci suspected early last year that COVID-19 possibly leaked from a Wuhan lab, yet stayed silent as conservatives were banned off of popular platforms for even questioning whether it came from a lab or not, even though Fauci suspected it came from a lab early last year. Fauci also suspected that they were funding by proxy gain-of-function research, which they were. He was called out by Rand Paul, even though he said that he didn't.
What are we doing after this?
There's in there that he said that masks are for infected people because masks, besides N95, the cloth mask, actually the COVID particles are small enough to get through them, which I've proven time and time again on my stream. If you see me, I'll vape through a mask, even though COVID particles are smaller than vape. Vape goes straight through, and I can blow it right back out. China misled the world. Someone emailed about China and how China's misleading other countries and what's happening. This is someone emailed them saying sequences looked engineered. And I want to go back to the China misled the world. The doctor that was emailing Fauci about the China misleading the world, he replied back to that email with too long for me, didn't read.
We have fun.
That was his reply back to that email. With that being said, he also contacted Disney back and had a whole phone call about having a documentary about Dr. Fauci. Dr. Fauci was more interested in a documentary about himself than reading a doctor's email about how China is misleading the world. And with that, I'll end my opening statement.
Players that keep on getting each other.
Okay, I'm going to throw it over to Hunter.
Yeah, so admittedly, I did not read all 3,000 emails. I had other things I had to do as well. But there is a lot of misinformation, nonetheless, that's going on around this. For one, the guy just brought it up about the genomes not looking the same or possibly looking manufactured. This kind of instilled this idea that Fauci maybe had this idea that it came from a lab and for some reason decided to cover it up. When you actually look at like what the email said, at least from the Dr. Anderson, he said that some of the sequences looked like they could have been engineered, but more analysis was needed. And then later on, there was more analysis, and he said it didn't so much actually look like it was engineered. And the thing that's really important here is even if it did come out of a lab, I'm fine like talking about that. I want to know where it came from, so I don't really care. But even if that were the case, like right now, the way that we're trying to the way that we're kind of using this to fuel misinformation is kind of aside the point. Like even if it came from a Wuhan lab, I'm not sure that's necessarily relevant at the moment. Furthermore, well, it wouldn't have been relevant at least then when it comes to actually getting this under control in the United States of America, right?
All right, chat. I figured it out.
And
I know
lastly,
I'm gonna say
when we talk about this is my last.
I've got it.
Lastly,
Watch
when we
this
talk
shit.
about the lab conspiracy theory, at the time, it was a conspiracy theory because how rational human beings go about things is, one, right now the experts are saying this doesn't look like it came from a lab. So it doesn't sound like this is coming from a lab. But when more information is available that suggests maybe it did come from a lab, we now see a rise in experts that are saying, hey, let's further investigate the origins of this thing. That's how rational people go about things. They follow what the data and evidence says. They don't just start spamming Wuhan lab, Wuhan lab, Wuhan lab, hoping that one day somehow it turns out to be right. And then one of their conspiracies turned out to somewhat be correct.
Okay, next is going to be apparently not Destiny, CTV.
Well, I don't know how it is that we're going to be. Hold on. Let's start off this way. Raise your hand if you have a medical degree. Notice how nobody's motherfucking hands went up, right? So the fact that Joe Lewis is going to try to posit that he read 3,200 and I think 52 fucking emails, right, is kind of fucking pointless if we follow Joe's own fucking logic, right? When it comes to understanding things, since he wants to speak so condescendingly to somebody in his last fucking statement, right? So since you don't have a medical degree, sit down, shut the fuck up, right, about that kind of shit, because it doesn't fucking matter. Now,
I'm
Rand
sorry,
Paul
but you
made a
don't
pretty
need it.
good
You don't
case
need a medical degree to read
in
emails.
Congress when he was talking
Like-
to Dr. Fauci about the funding of
Pocket
gain-of-function
guess,
research,
guess
right?
what
And
branch
while
he's in.
Fauci wanted to,
I
you know,
guarantee you can guess.
skirt it under the fucking table. Evidence came out since then to prove exactly what Rand Paul was saying.
Bro,
right? The United States is
nailed it! I
funding
told you you
gain-of-function
could guess it.
research,
Yes,
right?
my
So
God,
because
bro.
of that, right? It's like, maybe there is something to this. The investigation.
Oh,
is
you
still
saw it in the
ongoing,
stream?
and
Okay.
I bet we get to the fucking bottom of it.
It's like,
here
damn
before
it.
too long, right? And we'll damn
Oh,
sure be
you
holding
killed
them
it,
fucking
dude.
communists responsible.
Oh man.
Okay, we're throwing it over to American Nacho.
Yeah, so I also actually read all 3,000 emails. I just forgot them all, so it was a long day. That being said, is anyone here an educator? Pog, I'm memeing. Anyways, the emails to me seem like a dud. It's like they're not like there's a lot of people on the right that were like, "Oh, this is like the proof of the pandemic." And this is just like everything that we need to take down the government, and Fauci is a part of it. Da 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 da. And then like the left was like, "There's nothing happening here," and really the truth is a little bit like in the middle. So there are some things that are kind of like that make Fauci look a little bad, but then you know it's pretty tame at the end of the day. So that's really it.
Okay, I don't know where Destiny went. I assume his computer just went.
You like
under.
that shit?
But
Dog.
besides that, as we hopefully he comes back
Or-
later, I wanted to quickly say to everybody that, hey, I am sponsored, and this stream is
didn't even
sponsored
see
by
it.
Raid Shadow Legends. And you know what? I'd really
Hey,
enjoy?
let's go.
What would be super dope if you downloaded it and played it. Just a tutorial. If you don't like anymore, you don't need to play anymore. Just use my download link by putting !raid in chat. And you know what Destiny told me before he left? He DM'd me, he said, you know what, Dylan? If you hit the last goal for this raid download and tutorial plays, I will uninstall Raid Shadow Legends from my computer. It's amazing. That is a Dylan Burns promise. He sent me that. I can verify it. I have the DM. So that is a verifiable Dylan Burns promise. Destiny, you're back. You can do your intro. Welcome back, buddy.
Fuck.
Or not. Oh, there he
I'm
is.
seeing people in my chat say his computer died.
Just what do you want from me, okay?
I don't know. Be a streamer.
As much money as you're making off of it, you think you could afford a better computer.
Whoa, you
Single me
can't
out
see his
like
bank
that.
account. Let's relax there,
Fine,
buddy.
fine. Okay,
Oh,
Destiny,
okay,
you can
Are you being
do
classist?
your opening statement on the emails.
I mean, we should always be holding our public figures accountable. We should be looking through what they're saying. If we get email leaks, my understanding is that for the particular Fauci leak, there wasn't any like huge. It was just a big nothing burger. I'd be curious in hearing and reading that exact quote again. I remember reading this a while ago, but that idea that like Fauci knew it was made in
Wait,
China.
you said-
I feel like when I read over that email, it was more
Nacho
just
plays
like
Destiny
people
No Homo
saying
Pod.
like, "Oh yeah, we acknowledge this is a possibility. We should
Hey,
look
thanks
into
for
it." I don't
the
think it was
follow,
like
Pugsy. Appreciate
it was
it.
like a oh god, it was made in China. Cover it up.
Didn't he
That
say-
wasn't my
didn't he
impression
say
when I got
it
reading
would
it, but
match?
maybe when we get the exact text of that later on,
Feels
maybe I'll feel a
bad,
little bit
man.
different.
I always get
so it's good
scammed by
to read
chat,
emails,
dude.
hold our figures accountable, acknowledge that things change over time, and that public
Look
figures
at
are
him,
not going
dude.
to tell us every
Faking
single
me
thing
out.
that they know at all points in time.
X300.
When they are public
Faking
officials,
me
when they're
out, dude.
responsible for them to do so.
You had to make me want it.
Also, for people in chat, to be clear, it was not a leak. It was a Freedom of Information request, I believe.
A FOIA, yes.
Yeah. Okay, you guys may begin.
Yeah, CTV addressed me directly, so I guess I'll cover this now. I never posited in my opening statement that I read these emails. I specifically cited somebody who did. His name is Feline Father. He also created a Dr. Fauci timeline. He also was on Dr. Heemdout's stream talking about the very specific timeline that he created, and he also dedicates his stream as a person who studies in the medical field to help deal with COVID misinformation. My plea here, to be very direct here, is that if anybody is going to make a claim about an email, because I put it in chat, I put the Fauci timeline in chat, it seems that most of us have access to the emails now. If somebody makes a claim about an email, I think for the sake of Twitch and the fact that some individuals like Hunter are on YouTube, we should be very careful about how we navigate this topic. And if we say anything, we want to make sure, what does the email exactly say? What's the context around the date of the email and all of that? And between, I would posit to say 4,000 people watching this across all platforms, we could probably get some brains together to figure out what's being said. And that's my hope. So if somebody makes a claim about an email, let's control F the email, see exactly what it says, and then maybe look at connecting news stories around that, and maybe we can get a better understanding of it. And that's my plea.
So I'll make it even better. I'll make it even better for you, Joe Lewis. Page 522. Page 522. It was
all right. You got that, chat?
Bro, where are these? Wait,
does
anyone have
Dr. Michael Jacobs?
I had the link to these
February
stupid
21st,
emails, but I have like 7
You're
billion
going to
tabs.
have to slow down. You're going to have to slow down because there's a delay. So people who are watching are probably not going to get the information as fast.
It was an email from
interrupting doesn't fucking help that process, does it, Joe?
It was an
email. Your interruption. No, this
that
one.
It was an email from Dr. Michael Jacobs, Friday, February 21st, 2020, 6:14 p.m.
Page 522, you said?
Yes, page 522. Okay. Dear Tony, I'm a Cornell Medical School redacted graduate. I am an associate professor of dermatology at Weill Cornell in private practice, redacted. Alexander Tarkasi is redacted. And a professor at Rockefeller University, he is a virologist. We have been following the coronavirus pandemic closely. A few days ago, it became alarmed that the news that the Chinese government is sterilizing their paper money from Hubei province. We think there's a possibility the virus was released from a lab in Wuhan, the biotech area of China. We also think the virus might be complex with another organism, such as a yeast or fungus, to make it more sticky. We'd like to discuss this with you further. We feel that immediate action must be taken by United States scientists to try and neutralize this threat. Please contact Alexander and me at your earliest convenience at above emails, or my mobile redacted or office redacted. Michael Loxon gave me your email. With kind regards, Michael Jacobs. With that being said, at the earliest date with this email, the earliest date, February.
We're not done yet.
So
we're not done yet. What was Fauci's response?
No.
What was Fauci's response?
Fauci's response is please handle. Thanks. Okay. So now, with that being said, Fauci understood at the date of February 21st, 2020, that there was a possibility this virus came from Wuhan, the Wuhan Virology
Thank
Institute.
you, Demagog.
With that being said, conservatives were silenced again and again and again for saying that there's a possibility this came from the lab. This is ridiculous, and this is why conservatives are so against big tech. Because not only did we tell you the truth before the truth came out, right? We told you that it was probably going to come from the Wuhan Lab Institute, which it did, right? You can't say that. But you were just guessing, right? Because Fauci knew February 21st it came from Wuhan, or there's at least a possibility. So how are conservatives being silenced by big tech by even questioning whether it came from the lab?
There's a lot going on there.
This is very simple, okay? At the beginning of a pandemic, first of all, it is not Fauci's responsibility to investigate the origins of a virus, okay? That was not what was in the purview of his job at that point in time. Number one. Number two, this email reads like a troll email. I am really sorry, but you need to get your money back at whatever fucking school you went to. If you're graduating and you're an associate professor and you can't fucking capitalize or use basic punctuation in your email, I would have never responded to something like this. I'm surprised he even forwarded it to somebody. It reads like a troll email. Number three, there were a lot of theories flying around in the beginning for where it could have possibly come from. Nobody knew where it could have possibly come from. There was a lot of people guessing a lot of things. That doesn't mean that this one particular person emailing should have been taken so much more seriously above the rest. And number 4, conservatives weren't kicked off of platforms for saying, no, there's a possibility it came from a lie. They were kicked off of platforms for acting like they knew that with absolute certainty, and that they were using that to dismiss other evidence being given for how we should approach the virus by officials in the U.S. government.
Okay, with that being said, page 1150. Page
Hold
1150
on, slow it down. Page 1150, chat. 1150.
I think viewers can hear what I'm saying. I mean,
There's
if you
a
can
delay.
hear what I'm saying, viewers can hear what I'm saying.
Oh, we're trying to look it up too.
But
Yeah, we're trying to look it up too.
page 1150. All right.
All right.
It's a email from Peter Daszak, which works with the CCP. If you don't know, the Communist China Party.
We can get to that. Just get to the email.
With that being said, he says that in the email, I just wanted to state a personal thank you on behalf of our staff and collaborators for publicly standing up and stating that scientific evidence supports a natural origin from COVID-19 from a bat to human spillover, not a lab release for the Wuhan Institute of Virology. From my perspective, your comments are brave, and coming from your trusted voice will help dispel the myths being spun around the virus's origins. Once this pandemic's over, I look forward to thanking you in person and let you know how important your comments are to us all. I want to stress that this came from the CCP.
Who cares?
Okay. Who cares? The CCP lied over and over.
Wait, but this isn't evidence of anything. If Fauci is correct, then the CCP probably would be praising him. If Fauci was lying, I mean, like, would they make it this obvious?
No, the CCP was praising Fauci because they wanted it to stay to the story that it came from a bat and not from the Wuhan Institute of Virology.
This isn't evidence of anything. You understand that, right?
Accepted, and what I'm saying is it's commonly accepted. So when the CCP comes out and thanks you, do you think they're thanking you for speaking the truth? Do you think they're thanking you for speaking a lie? Like, are you fucking kidding me?
What evidence
this isn't evidence of anything.
Peter Daszak is a member of the CCP?
Okay, wait. Okay, I want to do one at a time. So Destiny, then Joe.
Yeah, also, I don't see how this guy... I'm trying to look up if this guy is like an actual member of the CCP. I see like he's a British zoologist.
He works
the guy
with the CCP is what I said.
Okay, I didn't hear works with the CCP. Now, I'm curious, did anyone else on this panel hear him say that he was a member of the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party?
No, but
Okay, I might have been the only one that heard that. Okay, yeah, but so like, I don't know if this guy like sending an email saying like, oh, thanks for being honest about the origins of the virus or whatever. I don't think that's not evidence of anything. That's just
it's not. It's even documented as like conspiracy bait for
Fauci
conservatives.
has no stance on having an opinion, yet he gave an opinion. It was not altered DNA. The only the part of Dr. Fauci's story was support the statement that our government failed.
Because that was what the information was at the time, right? So the information at the time, like what Destiny just said, it was developing quickly. We weren't sure of the origins. And again, it wasn't his responsibility to be concerned about the origins. It was his responsibility to be getting the pandemic under control. This idea that Fauci is some kind of crazy, like, malicious person who orchestrated the pandemic doesn't even make sense, considering the fact he's been working with our government since Ronald Reagan. Like, he's not like this new recent person that's coming here with some crazy conspiratorial idea or whatever. I mean, none of this sounds like anything. It sounds like emails that you guys are looking at and then taking out of context and thinking it kind of confirms what you already believe.
So just to be clear here,
wait, one at a time, okay? Because there's too many people talking at the same time. Okay, Joe is next, and then we're going to go to CTV.
There was a claim made that Peter Daszak is somehow a member of the CCP.
Works with
the CCP.
No, he said member. He said member.
Or whichever. All right. So, okay, member, works with, cock, penis. It says here within the Wikipedia definition that he was a member of the WHO team sent to investigate the origins of the virus in China.
That's the second word that gets us demonetized on YouTube. Let's go, baby.
So my question for you is, what evidence do you have that supports
and
that
that's
Peter
definitely going to be a soundbite.
Was a member of the CCP? Please be incredibly direct to whatever your claim is. If it's works with, what evidence do you have? If it's member, what evidence do you have? I don't care which. Please be as direct as you can with that.
Okay, so since I was next, right? So
no. This is for Zach. This is for Zach.
The loop wasn't closed though. Dr. Fauci having a stance on an opinion when yet he gave an opinion, it was not altered DNA. They only take the part of Dr. Fauci's story that supports the statement that the government failed, right? So then, you get to the reality of.
What is that Fauci quote? Not altered DNA.
Oh, here you go.
You have
British-
a guy that's been working, like Hunter said, that the guy's been working since the Reagan administration. Okay, so he doesn't actually have the position to give an opinion on altered DNA, and yet he did. That is inherently where the fucking
what is
problem
real quick? What is the quote that Fauci said? I'm sorry, real quick about.
I think they're referring to a Christian Anderson talking about saying that the COVID genome looked like it was altered in some way, but then it explicitly said that more research was needed. And that guy then went on to be a huge proponent against the idea that it came from a lab leak. He just did an interview with Yahoo News, once again doubling down that it did not come from a lab.
Yeah, but he's saying that Fauci said it wasn't altered DNA. Is there like an actual Fauci quote that says that? I'm just curious if anybody has that quote.
While people look for that quote, I'm gonna respond to what Joe Lewis said to me.
Can't you have it since you were the one that made the claim?
According to I'm sorry.
Who was the one that made the claim? Was it you?
No, not him. It was a critical thinking veteran.
I believe it was
several
CTV.
times.
Go back.
So while this is happening, I'm gonna respond to Joe Lewis. According to TaiwanNews.com.tw. British, and I'll post the link in chat for those interested. British zoologist, the president of EcoHealth Alliance.
Yeah, it's kind of weird, Pugsy, because
the only individual to be a part of the
Destiny's
WHO
also
and the
been
Lancet
canceled because of
teams
this whole
investigating
fucking
the
like
origins of
cancel
the
culture
Wuhan,
wave
coronavirus
nonsense,
pandemic. However, he has had long-term professional and financial ties
It is what
with
it
the
is.
Wuhan Institute
I mean,
of
he's still on the
Virology,
left, so he's still gonna.
which represents a conflict of interest.
We would have to look at what those financial ties are. I know there was one financial tie that people tried to talk about, but it was like a donation through a nonprofit, and it was not at all this like as nefarious as was made out to sound.
And also, he's a public expert on disease
It actually, Pugsy,
ecology,
it actually just
particularly
depends. Sometimes I've heard him go
zoonosis,
hard
and the
on
Wuhan
like the cancel
Institute
culture stuff
specializes in
and
studying
use himself as an
coronaviruses,
example, but
especially
then I've
related to
also
those that
heard
come from
stuff
animals
like
like
what you're
bats.
talking
Is
about.
that really that like? Is it really that crazy that he would have like close ties to that institution?
He's got
like,
financial
CTV
ties
Rage
to the Wuhan
compilation series.
Institution of Virology.
What does
So-
financial ties mean? Like, he got paid to
made
do
a
some
CCP
consulting, or
claim.
like?
Die on the
I mean,
hill.
I
He made a
couldn't
CCP
finish,
claim.
so I
Die
mean,
on the
it's just
hill.
funny. It's just funny I couldn't finish. So
Well, it's not funny, but like you also literally
I mean,
said
it's
that like when the
hilarious.
CCP
It is
comes out and
hilarious.
congratulates you,
never says that,
Okay. Please finish, Browdicus. I'd like to hear it.
Okay. He has financial ties, right? So if he has professional and financial ties with an Institute of Virology, and you see this in government all the time, when people have financial ties, and liberals talk about it all the time, when you have financial ties to an organization, you're going to back that organization whether it makes sense or not. So what happened was he and this is why I said that he was working with the CCP, because he was working with the Wuhan Institute of Virology. So with that being said, he was going to protect his money. He was going to protect what he had invested in the
Who's
Wuhan
keeping
Institute of
count?
Virology, because he knows that if this actually came out, that it wasn't from a bat, it actually came out. It
We
was
gotta be,
leaked
like,
from a
plus
lab.
20 by
I don't
now.
think it was purposely leaked from a lab like people do, like where China was just using this as a biological weapon. I think it was accidentally leaked from a lab. And with that being said, he's going to protect his stakes, just like any politician would. He's going to sit there and protect his stakes.
We're gonna say
Yeah, I mean,
by now.
no evidence for it.
biology, some elementary language.
This is a,
knowledge.
literally
be.
this is a
Wait. Okay. Destiny, Joe Lewis, Hunter. That's the order we're gonna go.
Yeah, so this is fuck. I don't want to get too far into this because it'd be interesting if there's any actual evidence. Most conspiracy theories work by creating just those stories. So what you do is you find 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 different pieces of what you call evidence, and then you find a story to tie them all together. So what you found is that this guy, factually, seems to have some affiliation with this Wuhan Institute, maybe even financial ties. We can even grant you that. But to jump, and then he's also congratulated Fauci for saying that, oh, it's good that you took a stance against saying that this wasn't like leaked intentionally or something like that. Now, from there, you've spun a story about how he's doing it to protect his financial interest, even though he knows the truth. Otherwise, you have zero evidence for that claim. You're just telling a story right now. It's a cool story. It's interesting, but you have absolutely no evidence to posit for this. And the reason why we know you have no evidence is because this is like the link that you're trying to like rest your entire story on. I think it's better to just move on to the next piece of evidence because this is literally nothing.
Okay,
You spun a story with no evidence.
I have a question, Destiny. So when we talk about congressmen or senators that protect firearms acts and have giant financial ties to people who manufacture firearms, do you spin a story about how they're protecting their liquid assets that are inside of firearm manufacturers? Are you spinning a story with that one? I mean, I'm just seeing if we're being accurate here.
That's not the story that would make this the equivalent. The equivalent would be is let's say that the NRA came out and like murdered a bunch of kids and was trying to cover it up, and and now you have a bunch of congressmen saying like, oh no, I don't think they did that. That would make it equivalent. Like if this guy, for instance, was out here publicly saying like, oh yeah, like I support this institution, I think they're good, and then I look and it's like, oh okay, you have financial ties, sure, but that's not what you're claiming. You're not claiming that he's just supporting an institution. You're claiming that he's actively taking part in a conspiracy to cover up the origins of a virus. That is a far more bigger claim that you would need more evidence to actually make that assertion of.
Yeah, I thought Steve Nash retired. Hold on, see.
Fauci doesn't even have a background in that, right?
Joe was next. Joe was next.
But he doesn't even have a background in it. And you
CTV. CTV. Nobody here has a background in virology. Okay, but yet we're all talking about it. Okay, we're gonna CTV. We're gonna go to Joe.
The one that doesn't
God
have the
damn
background.
it. Okay.
Problem.
Okay, CTV, you're gonna be muted for 5 minutes. Joe Lewis, you're next. Then we'll do Hunter.
Yeah, so this is very interesting to me because last time I checked, I thought Steve Nash was retired because I've never seen a white person break my ankles that hard in my entire life. Holy shit, man! You have a career in Golden State. Like, have LeBron call you, bro. Jesus, how do we get to guns? So what's the next claim? Let's just like.
Stick to the original claim. It was just an argument against what Destiny was saying.
What's the next piece of evidence? Yeah. What's the next piece of evidence we got?
Really quick, is Spartacus talking about Daniel, or I'm sorry, Peter Daszak?
Peter Daszak. Peter Daszak, whatever you want to say.
He didn't really have like these financial ties necessarily. The grant was provided by him. So again, you are kind of spinning this, right? You're making it sound like he has some kind of personal like investment in this virology lab, when in reality it sounds like he just provided a grant, which is again very, very different.
Let me read further into the article that I was reading from. Please allow me this time. Richard H. Eyebright is the Board of Governors, professors of chemistry and chemical biology at Rutgers University and laboratory director at Waxman Institute of Microbiology. He's told Taiwan News that Daszak is the contractor who funded the WIV's research on bat SARS-related coronavirus with subcontracts of $200 million in U.S. aid funding and $7 million in NIH funding. Eyebright also said Daszak is a collaborator on the WIV research for bat SARS-related coronaviruses. He lamented that the WHO named Daszak as a member of its review team, and the Lancet names Daszak as the head of its review team. Eyebright said that.
Dude, also, if you do a Google search of the bat lady Wuhan virology lab, and you set it
in addition to the funding
to a time period, and you set it to like before 2016, before like 2017, like as the ending from like 2000 to like 2017, you'll find this lady that used to work there. So
from the U.S. Department of Defense. When asked whether Daszak had been involved in the controversial gain-of-function research on experiments on bat coronavirus at WIV, Eyebright said Daszak has been a contractor, a collaborator, and a co-author on work at the WIV on construction and analysis of novel chimeric coronaviruses.
They took all of her. You can find articles about her, but just all of her papers.
It doesn't literally prove nothing.
Here's the problem why I say it's not evidence. There's no piece of evidence that we could provide that would counter like your story, because it's just a story. Like all you've said is that like here's a link, maybe it's worth further investigating, but like that's it. There's nothing for us to disprove. Like what possible counter argument could we even give?
Curious too. I'm curious on why you think that someone who has
ties... That's a question you should be able to answer.
No, I'm curious too. I'm curious on why you think that a person who has ties to the Wuhan Institute of Virology is able to investigate the Wuhan Institute of Virology. If I don't remember correctly, over the summer there's a lot of issue about police investigating police, right? So that line of thinking should carry over to why should a Wuhan Institute of Virologist investigate a person who works there be able to investigate the Wuhan Institute of Virology?
So there are multiple organizations all over the world that are trying to get more information. Taiwan's medical people were trying to get more information out of this. The WHO was trying to get more information out of China. The American medical organization and government was trying to get more information out of China. It's not. Do you think this is like the one person that all of the investigations are following?
No, but that's the one person who was put on the Lancet investigation team and the WHO investigation team who also worked at the WIV, right? So. He was the head of the Lancet investigation team. He was on the WHO investigation team. This is ridiculous that you think he's going to be a non-biased investigator. Do you think that China lied about their death numbers? Do you think China lied about how many people were infected?
I'm just saying that all you're doing is
China's truthful.
all you're doing is present. China fucking probably lies about everything. I wouldn't
Oh,
trust fucking
okay.
China for
So I'm
anything.
glad we can read China lies.
Okay, yeah. I mean, everybody
Yeah,
lies about a lot of different
Twitter,
things. I don't know what the point of that is.
I can't
The
either.
Lancet is a peer-reviewed medical journal. It's possible, even likely, that investigations related to this institution are probably going to run into a lot of cross, potential sources of like people that are going to be intermingled with this stuff.
interest.
He's like the left
conflict
Ben
of interest.
Shapiro,
Like,
though.
that's
and he
entirely
talks
possible.
So fucking fast.
But I mean, like, it doesn't make sense. Like what you're positing otherwise. Like, should we only get scientists that have nothing to do with virology and nothing to do with disease ecology to come and do the research? Like, it doesn't make any sense. You would probably want people that are involved in these organizations or institutions to be like the people that you reference. This guy didn't solo publish that study on the Lancet, and the Lancet is a peer-reviewed medical journal, and there are other people that are involved in that study too. Now, unless you're going to go and take this a step further and say that this one guy managed to taint literally every single investigatory body and study that he was a part of, which we would need evidence for that, unfortunately, you don't really have any point here.
Also, clearly, I just want to wait. CTV has been unmuted. Just wanted to make that clear. Okay, Spartacus, you can continue.
He's deafened, but he's the lead investigator into this, right? So he's the lead investigator from Lancet, and he has direct ties to the WIV. With that being said, let's say you
that counter's got to be up there,
a
guys.
bakery, or let's say you owned a security force, right? The security force had some issues with it. I was sure as heck would not choose
I'm gonna have to
experts
review this on
that have ties to
time.
Destiny's
and just
security
count
force
it out.
to investigate Destiny's security force. You choose people who don't have conflicts of interest. This is common among all governments. You choose people who don't have conflicts of interest to investigate what they're investigating without having a conflict of interest. How is it so hard to get that you should get people that don't have conflicts of interest? How's it so hard to get?
Real quick, it's funny. It's funny to me because I was watching Avengers Endgame, and even like with Loki, in the face of knowing that he's going to die, he still tried to strike Thanos with everything that he had. So I'm seeing a parallel here where we have an individual who's choosing to die on a hill, has been told numerous times that the hill that he's choosing to die on shouldn't be the hill, and despite that we keep going. So I don't know what you're trying to prove here, Zach, but this just ain't it, my friend. Like, this just ain't it. So like, if you got another thing that we can work with, maybe
you're kind of backing up to
so Joe
you're
Lewis,
saying, well,
you're interested.
You're going
Lewis,
like,
you're interested.
Wait. Let's Spartacus respond to one thing at a time, Hunter. So we'll go to you next.
So Joe Lewis, you're interested in having people who have conflicts of interest investigate stuff stateside? Because if you're interested in having it internationally, then you're interested in having it nationally. So people who have conflict of interest on police forces should be able to investigate police forces. If they have that conflict of interest with the same police force you have an issue with, they should be able to investigate it because they're an expert in that field. This is asinine, and it doesn't follow any other line of thinking that you have. You're only bringing it up to go against me.
So what you're doing right now is you're backpedaling.
I need to make a.
You're not
backpedaling.
You're not just
Spartacus
talking about
breathing
a
in
conflict of
compilation.
interest here. You're alleging a conspiracy. That's a lot bigger.
You can actually address even just the point you're making. People do rely on people that are inside certain police forces in order to investigate those police forces. We literally just had an example of this where we all watched on the media where the defense in the Chauvin trial was literally calling on other police officers that were involved in that specific department and asking specific questions related to the training of those officers. This isn't uncommon practice. This is standard practice. Like,
Destiny,
of course you
rely on witnesses. You rely on witness statements.
Dude, look at how small these guys' heads are.
You don't
compared
rely
to
on
mine,
having
dude.
those same people
I got
be a part of the investigation
fucking alpha
team.
chat.
Witnesses are a part of the investigation. They're questioned on the stand to get
I
their
automatically
point of view.
win
They're not the
all the debates
investigation
on this
team. That's
panel
a far
just because
stretch.
of the
Even if
sheer
we were to
size of
grant
my
you
cranium.
every single part of your entire argument, which I don't think anybody hears about, but even if we did, you still have nothing. At the most, the statement that you can make here is, man, that guy probably shouldn't have been part of that investigation team. Maybe we should look more into the findings of that investigation, which, by the way, they have been looked into because this is peer-reviewed and literally every health organization around the world is looking into
I hope
this.
so.
But like that would be the most that you could possibly say. Well, maybe we should have been involved in it, and maybe we should look into it further. That's the most you've got.
And when the World Health Organization put out their review, put out their report, it was widely controversial that World Health Organization was working with China because they just trusted China's numbers. They didn't actually look into China's numbers. They just trusted them. And everyone knows that China was lying about their numbers. So with that being said, it was widely
there we go
gone
again.
against
It's gotta be
the
at like
World Health Organization report.
52.
That's why there was talk about the United States leaving the World Health Organization.
Okay,
no,
so
the WHO.
Yes.
Wait. Okay, so Destiny, I'll let you respond, but I do want to say that if there's anything out, if you want to keep talking about this, you can. But I just want to make clear that there's 3,000 emails. So if there's anything else that Sprouticus or CTV wanted to bring up, there's a lot of other emails that could be brought up at this point. Destiny can continue.
Okay, the idea that we left the WHO because China lied when Trump was the main push behind leaving the WHO, and he literally praised Xi in the beginning over and over and over again is just such a fucking like schizophrenic take. I don't even know how to make sense of that one. Okay, to reiterate again, we have no evidence that this guy tainted the investigation. Tons of other people looking into it. Even if we grant everything you said, all you've given us is something more to look into. You haven't given us any evidence of a conspiracy. That's it.
I mean, am I supposed to go through facts? Am I supposed to know these people? Am I supposed to talk to these people? Am I supposed to investigate them, put them on the stand, tell them they have to tell me the full truth, nothing but the truth, and only the truth?
Are we supposed to believe that just
am I supposed to believe? Am I supposed to do that? Are we supposed to do that? Do I have that? Do I have
You're
that
making
right?
claims.
Okay,
as
there's
if
two
you
things.
did
Number
that.
one, you're not supposed to do that. Other people do that, and then you cite those people. Number one, you know that. Number two, I can flip that right back around to you. Are we supposed to believe that just because there's one conflict of interest located here, that China genetically engineered a virus from a lab and leaked it, and nobody else in the world has figured this out? Every single other organization was looking into this. Just happened to let this one guy that has publicly stated his grant affiliations with an institution to taint every single investigation. Like, your conspiracy theory means that we have to rely on the inadequacies, on the ineptitudes of so many other officials, so many other countries, so many other bodies that look into what these countries and officials do. Like, it rises to an insane level that you think some random dude on the internet that can look at a guy's Wikipedia article and go, wow, there might be a conflict of interest here, has more insight into the investigatory abilities of organizations than every single other one of these organizations working together combined. Like, that is just such an unbelievable conspiracy theory to posit. I can't believe that you were doing it without irony.
First off, I didn't claim it was a bioweapon, right? So I actually claimed that I didn't think it was a bioweapon like other
Abby,
people
thanks
claimed,
for the
right?
follow.
Second off, I'm not pulling this information from Wikipedia. I'm pulling this from one, a journalist, right? And I'm pulling this from two, Fauci's emails. So with that,
dude.
I'm sorry. Do you have an issue with international news, Joe? I apologize. Do you have an issue with international news?
I have an issue with your critical thinking ability and your ability to look at sources and do cognitive reasoning and all these other types of things that I really wish that the education system in the United States didn't fucking fail you on. And it's really just breaking me now.
Joe, you just have an issue with me. You just have an issue with me generally. Last time, I mean, I'll bring this up again. Last time you told me white people should ride the short bus. So with that being said, Joe, I'm done. No, there's a clip. There's a clip of that. There's a clip of that. There's a clip of that. Joe, there is a clip. Joe, there is a clip of that.
Okay. So there's two people talking at the same time. Okay. I don't even know who started that, so I'm just gonna go Joe, then Sprout.
Sure.
Joe?
Don't die on this hill. I want another email. Let's go. Just give us something else. This ain't it. If that's all you got, then can we end early? Cause shit, like I'd be down for that. Like, so if you don't have anything else, like, I don't know what to tell you.
Was this all you had, Spartacus, for the email stuff?
I mean, what I said was a lot of it just seemed like Fauci was a dick, and I gave you several instances as to why I personally thought there were a few issues with Fauci's emails, and I will repeat them since you bring up another email.
Appreciate the follow, Hulk Hogan.
Basically,
nice.
There is the Fauci new. So Fauci
National
new.
Soup Crisis.
This May 550.
I think we need to ban
I
soup.
said the first time. The audience doesn't remember.
Nah, nigga. New one. We need a new one. We need a new one.
So I'm gonna bring up. No, I'm going through my stances.
Nah,
Are you fucking serious right now, Joe Lewis?
Are you already heard your stances? It's a bedtime story.
Wait, what are you saying? What page? What page?
Oh, man.
No, I'm not asking. Okay, CTV, I thought I unmuted you. I did not unmute you. I apologize for that. I'm sorry about that. Just want to do that.
Clearly, we're working on lefty time then, right?
You will have an extended period of time compared to everybody else for closing statements.
This is what I'd like to do, right? Because at this point, I feel like there's somebody that's much older than me, somebody that's a colonel in the United States Army, right, and somebody that would have direct fucking knowledge of these things should probably be the one that speaks on my behalf. Will you allow it?
Wait, what?
What do you? Are you asking me to bring
fuck Destiny all up?
What?
Right? It's about to happen. Yeah.
Do you need to go on another timeout?
I
think he needs another
timeout. What are we talking about?
Are you asking to bring in another guest to the show?
I'm asking for myself right, to just remain muted for the rest of the time, because clearly lefty time doesn't involve 5 fucking minutes, and for Colonel Dan, right, to come in here and expand on the level of knowledge on this fucking panel. That's what I would like.
I don't know who Colonel Dan is.
A very, very respectable gentleman that would definitely be
It's his
able to
blow up
highlight.
doll.
Dude, let's bring in Colonel Dan, dude. Let's do it.
You don't want to
Do it. I voted for
Dude,
it.
let's do it.
Go for it.
Okay,
Let's fucking do it.
I'm actually deadly. This is not usually what I do. I've only done this
Do
once
it.
before.
Let's
but I'm
go.
so
Fucking
curious.
Colonel Dan, Dylan.
It is
Fucking
Colonel
let's
Dan.
go,
Wait, no,
Colonel
wait.
Dan.
Do we keep
You know
our
what's gonna
cameras
be?
on? Do we keep our cameras
okay.
on?
The thing is,
Do we-
let me be clear. If it is Hart Dan, then I don't know about that because his relationship with children is a little like iffy. Like I just okay.
Whoa,
sorry.
that's a bad joke.
Is that a bad joke? Well, this is my channel.
bad
So
joke.
anyway,
Do we at least get to keep
okay,
CC,
okay. No, he'll be okay. Fine, we'll bring in Colonel Dan. Get him in call-ins. We'll bring him in. Okay, as long as he doesn't come in here and like yell at
Let's
us or
fucking
something.
go.
Fair
Okay.
enough. I will remain muted and get him in here.
Can we get some fucking pogs in the chat for Colonel Dan, dude? Let's go.
Hey, Mike, can I
in the
ask
chat
you?
for CTV muting himself? Hell yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Mike, can I ask you a question real quick? Is this everything you expected and more? Because you can have this every week, my friend. It's possible.
I will just say that I have a lot more respect for all of you for doing this on such a regular basis, because this just like sucks the energy and the life force out. Like for me on my show, I take a lot of time to like go through, read articles, and just like very like slowly come to the conclusions I want. And there's no yelling, there's no pressure. And here it's like, oh my God, like if this were in person, you folks would be like killing each other. But it is entertaining, I will say that. Like it's funner to watch, I feel like, than participate. But it's here's what I'll say. I'll be tuning in a lot after this. I will say
Someone
that.
give him a sub. Someone give this man a sub, okay?
Facts.
You gotta make sure he stays in the community.
Yeah, dude, if you're not subbing
I
to
think-
Dylan for fucking Colonel Dan, then you're a scumbag, okay?
Yes,
Bro,
yes.
Colonel Dan, Patriot,
kick
hero.
Let's fucking
Colonel
go,
Dan up in
baby.
this joint.
Okay, so you guys can continue. By the way, we're not on Colonel Dan.
We're waiting for Colonel Dan. We're all waiting with bated breath.
Yeah, no,
Dude, we're fucking excited, man.
Okay,
Let's go.
so my job, I've allocated my job on this is just to find the emails. I'll work with chat so like they can
Okay.
like for the page numbers.
Joe,
I'm-
help me
I'm
out. I
gonna-
got something for you to look up. Okay, what are the
Jesus Christ.
emails where Fauci's like emailing Disney about a documentary or some shit? Is that a thing or is that fake?
Yeah, no, just look up Disney. I can find it if you want me to.
That
apparently,
does not
apparently, like
exist.
It does
mid-pandemic, he was like emailing Disney or some shit. But
Yeah, it does exist.
Is Disney spelled
it's-
D-I-S?
like I said, I read all the
It's-
emails, but I
it's-
forgot them.
I got it. I got
It's
it.
on
got it?
page
It's-
1,455.
Yeah, page 1455.
All right, let me read it.
But I don't know what the problem is with this either.
What is
But what is happening?
what am
Guys, I'm so sorry. That's
Is
my
that
voice.
Colonel Dan?
Colonel Dan's calling Joe Lewis.
Oh no.
Colonel Dan's on the phone, like, "Hey, I heard you're an educator, bro."
Humanist? You got a gift sub, by the way, so you can tune in.
thank you also- your chat is so. I love your chat. Your chat is amazing.
Thank you so much. I'm so curious now. I'm also hyped for Colonel Dan. I
guys like
don't
that?
know who this is.
You like that, Paka?
This is
Like that shit.
I'm honestly surprised. Like, look, this is where I'm going to say, right? I'm surprised
This is gonna be such a
that you
good
don't
video.
know who Colonel Dan is, because he gave an exemplary performance on the Hickory Dickory podcast, right?
Mm-hmm.
Exemplary.
You don't know who
But the fact that you don't know just lets me know that you're not really keeping up with, things that you
I'm
might
gonna be on
want
that
to.
next week.
If you don't chew Big Red, then
I'm
fuck you.
I'm aware you are, right? That's why I'm curious why you don't know who Colonel Dan is. Right?
True. True.
You know what? I've Colonel Dan has eluded me. He's sneaky like that because he has history in the military.
I had
Seriously,
this
Dylan,
image
it's
of,
kind of
like,
embarrassing,
And
dude.
just like being this Giga Chad. He's a little bit older. He's a silver fox. Like I just have this image built up. So
Long
he's
beard.
everything that you've hyped him up to be.
He looks like
Does he
Braun
have any-
Strowman beard length.
Does he have any relation to Colonel Sanders? Like, does he have some?
No, he's an actual army colonel.
Okay.
Well,
good.
anyway, again, so
He is a bit of
he's
a boomer, though. I will say that. So I'm trying to coach him in here, okay?
okay,
So
so you
relax.
guys, he's trying to coach him in here, so we don't know if
Just
he's
the
even going to
Disney
come. So you guys
emails.
can
No, he's
continue the
coming.
conversation. Oh, he is
Yeah.
coming.
Yeah,
He is
he's
coming.
Oh
Okay.
yeah.
So here's the thing, right? Regardless of whether it was ultimately a lab or not, and like in terms of the leak, here's the deal: it's irrelevant in
wasn't a
terms
leak.
of in terms of
Olive just
holding
took my
the,
chair
CCP
out,
to
bro.
account.
What
And
the
what I find is interesting is that a lot of conservatives, especially,
cheered.
harp on this and really kind of hype it up and everything. And
Thank you for the cheers,
to the
man.
WHO, which is kind of weird because the WHO actually does get a ton of money from the Communist Party. Like there's no conspiracy around there. That's a really obvious conflict of interest that the WHO has. But a lot of conservatives will use this. And I've said before, I was amazed at how they initially tried to kind of claim that the whole thing was fake. And then when that didn't work, they kind of went with maybe it was a lab leak or something to try to get a one-up on the CCP. But the problem is their foreign policy directly assists the CCP. So they want to pull out and surrender to the Taliban in Afghanistan. That was what Trump was all big on. So on the one hand, yeah, they have a big rhetoric about China
and we were
because
talking about
communists, I guess. But then on the foreign policy, they
Alf
want to
6
surrender
CA
from the world
cheered.
everywhere. So they're outraged
X200.
over China. It just in some ways it seems disingenuous because they
Wait,
don't actually want to do anything.
are you saying it's disingenuous because we want to take our boys home from a 20-year war?
Wait,
that's
how
never
are we
gonna be
here?
won?
When we left,
Are
we
you
were
saying that's
talking about the
disingenuous?
emails, and now we're talking about Afghanistan.
Who signed up for a mission, dude. They signed up.
Dude, that segue was fucking epic.
Bro, back off. I'm a veteran. Seriously, are you telling me that they're my boys? They're my brothers. They're my sisters. So,
yes,
are
Kevin,
you telling me
reveal your
it's
power level.
disingenuous to take our boys home from a 20-year war that we keep taking casualties from that's never gonna be won?
There were no U.S. deaths in Afghanistan in last year, but additionally, 20 years. You want to act like the same troop presence was there the full 20 years?
Kevin, spread your wings, you hawk.
For like 3 years of it.
What the hell? You said there was... I don't even know how to fucking respond to that shit.
So
what the fuck did you just say?
Colonel Dan's in the waiting room.
Let's go for Colonel Dan.
Hey,
so Hunter.
Wait. Okay, as much as I would love to have a foreign policy discussion, because everybody knows I love that, and I know Superpower Broadcasting has come to represent Hawkgang or whatever, we're bringing in Colonel Dan.
Dude, I respect the segue.
Colonel Dan.
We were from Fauci emails to fucking Afghanistan. That was smooth.
Colonel Dan.
Holy shit. Is it the Colonel Dan?
It is the Colonel Dan.
It's the Colonel Dan.
I think I hear you guys, but I hear about
There we
6
go.
Colonel Dan!
Colonel Dan.
Thank God. Finally, get the voice of reason in here.
I'm muting for this one.
All right, let's hear it, man.
Well, that seems to have calmed down a little.
That's because we're all here to listen to Colonel Dan.
Yeah, we're all waiting in silence.
We're ready.
Appreciate
Drop some
that.
wisdom.
So let's. I realize you guys probably have something else to go do, but
No, we don't.
I got background. I hear an echo with myself, so somebody have to help me fix that.
We don't hear
Oh, you got
Mute your mic.
You got to turn off the stream.
You need to turn the stream off.
Oh, you probably have the stream live right now. I got to turn off the stream. You need to turn
the
stream off.
Colonel Dan.
By the way, I do want to state that January 11th, 2022, U.S. service members were killed by a roadside bomb in Afghanistan. I do want to point that out. Also, 2 U.S. Air Force members were crashed January 27, 2020. So, also 2 U.S. Air Force members were crashed.
Hunter, there was a total part of this conversation that you never got to see because Kevin's here. I hope you get to experience that one day because it's actually incredible. Because Kevin's here, I hope you get to experience that.
Colonel
Dan is still trying to figure out. You have to.
I'm still hearing echo.
You gotta close out the stream and just have Discord open. Like you gotta like.
There's like
Close
a
the browser.
Chrome or an Edge
Close the
window.
browser.
Yeah, you gotta turn it. You gotta completely eliminate it.
Come on, Colonel Dan, you can do it.
You gotta shoot it like you went after America's enemies. Go after that browser like you went after America's enemies.
I think you got it.
Oh, what a cute
You
little
got it?
smartass you are.
Yeah, there he is.
There's Colonel Dan.
Is that better?
Yeah, it's a lot better.
Yes, excellent.
Oh, good. So I know there's a lot of discussion about Fauci, and I get it. The guy's in his limelight, and he should be. He's an important individual. But there's one distinction you guys are missing. Whether it comes to Fauci's emails, whether it comes to what does he understand, what has he done in his past, Fauci is not and never has been part of the bioweapons investigative team for Chinese bioweapons operations. He was never tasked to do that. He will never be tasked to do that because the process of determining if it's true or not must be determined before people like Fauci get involved because of the severity of what we're talking about. So the process to determine what the Chinese have done, might do, are capable of doing is outside the realm of Fauci. Now, he screwed himself up when he gave an opinion. Doctors give opinions. They go to school for 155 years and they love to give opinions. When he gave an opinion that he didn't believe that the Chinese had manipulated the virus, it flew into the political football arena that everything else in DC flies into. The fact of the matter is, Fauci has no authority nor any background to determine what the Chinese did. What has most likely happened with my background, my opinion is that both Trump and Biden have seen enough information from the community that it is tasked to see what's going on, that Biden came back and said, well, hold on, let's go make sure this story is run to ground, and we will go send the same intelligence community back into the arena to see if we can forensically determine what happened. That's the truth of the matter. The rest of this ideological arguing and name calling and funny hat wearing stuff, I don't have time for all that crap. I will tell you that if you're going to talk about what our nation does and how it does it in order to properly depict what a potential adversary or enemy is up to, there's a process. And if you don't know the process, somebody that hung 1,000 emails or 100 emails, somebody that read a survey or read an article about something, none of that matters. The process is there. It works. The White House is currently into that process, whether you like Biden or hate him. In the Fauci story, he's a doctor on the sideline, and he said too much, too often. And the only thing I don't like about the guy, at the end of the day, he does what everybody else in this arena does. He's written a book now about his experiences. So, the hell with guys like Fauci. Find the truth and then determine what you want to do with the truth, and leave all the other silliness out of this thing.
So real quick, in terms of Fauci commenting on the origins of the virus, it doesn't take like a bioweapons, investigatory team or something to have an opinion on that. If he's giving that opinion in the capacity of being a man that has background in medical information, that has read like a study relating to the origins of the virus. I think that when people refer to the idea that it wasn't like something that was created in a lab, there was published research on this back in March called The Proximal Origins of
Fauci
SARS-CoV-2,
is the
where
bioweapon.
researchers take a look at the virus and they try to guess whether or not this could have been something that was caused via gain-of-function research or something. It doesn't have to be a political statement that he's making because of some relation to the military or some bioweapons investigatory unit.
No. The investigation process that is going on constantly before this virus hit, going on now, will go on later, as to the geno development of bioweapons operations with the Chinese government and their capabilities to weaponize items in the biological arena is independent of everything you're talking about SARS virus, H1N1, anything else. That process is completely independent, and you're confused. I found a study, I found a survey, I found a doctor that said something. It's independent of what you're talking about. You have to differentiate the two.
What do you mean by independent of? Can you explain that?
Okay, so the bioweaponry analysis group that is typically run by the United States Army is tasked to maintain an situational awareness on our adversaries' current capabilities in bioweaponry. The leading edge of that issue since the Human Genome Program started is the ability to alter DNA level viruses for two purposes. One, to say if they are detectable or non-detectable, and two, to determine the lethality of that. That's the process our government is going through. That's the process our government has been going through. Is it possible that the Chinese are far enough ahead in this arena that we cannot detect what they've done? If that answer was yes, then that has spurred the Biden administration on to say, all right, continue to look. That's what this is all about. This isn't a black and white issue.
I don't understand what you're
Olive
saying. Are you under the
took out my
assumption that
share
the United
and
States
knocked over
government
the, like,
possesses
unplugged the TV.
unique
It's wild.
scientists or unique research that is private from the rest of the world that's capable of ascertaining the origins of SARS-CoV-2 in a way that no other researcher is capable of?
Yes.
Okay, I think that you just have a fundamental misunderstanding of how this research works and how it's carried out.
I have a fundamental. Okay, let me answer an acronym. I don't know who you are. I don't know where you are. I don't know your background. But let me give you an acronym, and you tell me if you understand this acronym and what it means, because this was my career. Do you understand what COG is? And before you Google it, tell me if you understand what COG.
Nope, no idea.
means.
Nope.
Okay, then I'm having a discussion with you that doesn't interest me. I'm here trying to help you come to a conclusion on a topic, not argue ideology. I'm not here to play, you're smarter than me, I'm smarter than you. I don't even know who the hell you are. But I
with all due respect, then why the fuck did you come on here if you weren't interested in having a conversation with us?
Asked me to, and he's a friend. I enjoy his show. I go on there. It's fun to listen to. I don't usually interact. The other two topics, I don't have an opinion of. That wasn't something that I need to have an opinion of. But when you start talking about our actions as a nation towards the Chinese and this virus event, which has killed millions of people, the facts do matter to me. It is a background that I have. I do understand how our nation, I was tasked to understand how our nation looks at what other nations may be doing. And Fauci is not part of that process. Most of the White House staff advisors are simply that. They're people that the White House turns to and says, define this for me. They're not part of the investigative process. Yes, they have a clinical background, a medical background, but they are not engaged in the current process, as they should not be. They should be removed from that process.
Yeah, I think so.
They might, like, just real quick, I'm sorry, like, we have an investigative process that exists inside of our government and our intelligence groups that's capable of doing things that individuals or other entities aren't. So things like surveillance, for instance, are things that not every institution is capable of doing. For sure. Anybody would agree with that. But when we talk about things related to like basic scientific research or stuff that is heavily decentralized, the idea that the United States has some unique hold there, that somehow our government possesses within it some researchers that are working in ways that other researchers all over the world that are analyzing these viruses are just not capable of. That's a really big assertion that I don't think even historically has played out. Like even when you talk about like the leaking of the radiation from Chernobyl, right? That was discovered by scientists in other countries. I don't think that you can take all of those scientific investigations and just centralize them in the government when the entire world has a vested interest in this research.
So, there's a classic saying, a good friend of mine used to always say, you don't know what you don't know. And I will tell you that our capabilities to detect and to monitor to the greatest extent that we can possibly do what our adversaries are doing in the realm of research, especially in bioweaponry, is above and beyond what is put out to the public. There are people that come into programs, they sign a non-disclosure. They come into the program, some of the brightest minds in the world from some of the greatest universities. And when they are done, they leave the program. But what they do is they sign a thing called a life letter. And the life letter means you can't talk about the programs you're involved in. You may have won the research grant, you may have done the work, but you can't talk about it because it is the word that some people hate, the words of national security. But the reality is that's the truth. Do we have capabilities above and beyond what the public knows? Yes. We accept that every single day when we hear about cyber. We just heard our president talk about it yesterday. The Russians don't understand our capabilities. Extrapolate that comment out further to the bio world. Do we have capabilities?
Are you asserting that it's a bioweapon?
No, I'm asserting that we are continuing to try and determine what happened and how. That's the determination.
And I think that that's a good point, of course. Like, that's obviously what we're all trying to do is determine the origin and everything else. But you keep bringing this up and saying that Fauci isn't involved in the actual investigation process, which then you then followed up and said which he shouldn't be. So, I mean, I agree with that also. Like, of course he shouldn't be. He is kind of, he's, He's working with the White House in handling this pandemic. He's more or less the spokesperson, right? So I don't think we would expect Dr. Fauci to be involved in this kind of an investigation. He's going to report on it or let us know what the evidence is suggesting at the time. And at the time when Dr. Fauci was talking about the lab leaks, there was pretty sufficient evidence that suggested it wasn't from a lab. Like, I don't see why Dr. Fauci isn't qualified to talk about these issues just because he wasn't in the process of the investigation.
He is qualified to do what he was tasked to do, and that's when the president turns to him as a White House advisor and say, "What do you think?" That's the most important part these people play. But you have to level that against when a president asks an advisor that, is the advisor all the way in on the conversation? Fauci is qualified to give his gut opinion. But Fauci is the first guy to tell you, I don't know all the particulars. I think in a roundabout way, he has said that. I don't fault Fauci for what he's done. Fauci has done what most medical people in the pandemic process of planning, CDC, when you go into the push packages and the strategic national stockpile planning process with CDC, you'll find that you often get a lot of doctors that lean too far forward because they're passionate about saving humans. It's not Fauci's an evil guy. It's that Fauci became a political football for both sides of an ideology.
What are your thoughts exactly on the Fauci emails then, specifically? So what we're talking about before you got here.
Thank you, Joe.
I missed that part.
If you took 3,000 of anybody's emails and went through them, you could probably subjectively come to all kinds of conclusions. Did Fauci say things in emails that he probably shouldn't have said? Probably, because let me tell you, Fauci may have had a TSSCI clearance, a top secret special compartmentalized individual clearance at some point in time, but the process of living in it for decades like other people do, we had a Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton. She's no new person to the process, but she made mistakes in what she said. If Fauci inadvertently said too much or got off track, so what? It doesn't mean the Chinese did it. It doesn't mean the Chinese didn't do it. The Fauci email thing, to me, and the people that I follow on Twitch, which is not that many, but CTV and some of them are, that's not what's important to me. It's not important to me what Fauci said in emails. What's important to me is let's stop trying to politicize whether we're doing the right thing or not with what the Chinese have or have not done. We're losing sight of what the problem is.
Sure. So again, I guess the follow-up question is, because we were running into a situation where we were inferring a lot within a particular set of emails. And I guess my question to you is, as somebody with at least a level of adjacency within what this profession is, how do we approach, or how could we approach reading and interpreting these emails as just a layman person? Right? Like, I'm a music teacher. I don't do this shit for a living. Like, the closest I know about health is just like the lung capacity and mouth shape and a few other things like cheek positioning in terms of intonation. But when it comes to like reading emails, trying to understand like the inference of certain things, right? I'm just like, that's not my wheelhouse. So I guess my question to you is, again, what should we look? How is there a way that we can look into these things without falling into conspiratorial traps?
Yeah, and I will tell you, once Fauci's emails were released, during the process of releasing them, because of the sensitivity of the topic, someone did go
can anyone in chat
someone probably
tell
did
me
come to the conclusion
what Joe's profession
the
is?
worst Fauci probably did here is he, like most of them do, he ran his mouth too much. If you want to blow a secret, if you want to misconstrue something coming out of the Pentagon, let the 4 stars send emails to each other. I mean, that's just a fact of life. The more important you get, the more you want to talk. And so did Fauci do something? Did he lie to the American people? Did he know something he didn't tell us? Did he try and cover up something? Fauci's not in that mindset. Fauci's in the mindset of, this is my world. This is what I do. He spent his whole life getting ready for an event like this. And sometimes you just talk too much. And emails, we all know that. We all know you can get on emails, and once you send them, they're forever. And then if you said something, there's something say, well, look what you said this right here. What did Fauci do, and did he mean to do it? That's not relevant to me. What's relevant to me is, can we figure out what took place? We got 3 million dead and people still dying. What took place, and how did it happen?
I appreciate that answer. And just one more thing, and I'm kind of like tossing this over. So if I am someone in your position, do you think you would, and this is going to sound like a weird question, but work with me. Do you think you would capitalize your email when you're sending it to a health professional like Dr. Fauci? Is that something you think you would prioritize in the email that you're sending?
If you're talking about syntax of emails, have you ever looked at a doctor's handwriting? You know,
Sure.
I don't, yeah. I mean, when you're deep in thought and you're banging away on the keyboard, God knows I'm that way. I mean, if you read what I read without spell check jumping in or Grammarly, you know, it probably looks pretty horrendous. Is that forensic evidence that it's fake or it's fake news? I don't, you know, I can't say it's fake news or not, but I think you can't make a judgment on the value of an email based upon a typographical or a syntax error.
Right, but I guess my concern is like, because I'm in a field, like I'm a teacher, right? So the way that I send an email to another professional can say a lot about how I might treat them and respect them. So that's why, like, for me, like I prioritize things like capitalization, even for my own university and places that I teach at. And like we were going over an email where the individual just kind of threw syntax out the window. And one of the things that we were talking about is the idea that like, how can we tell the legitimacy of a health professional if they can't even like capitalize an email? You know what I mean?
I'm sorry.
Or do you understand?
I'm
like,
ruining
like
this
that could,
VOD.
like logically
really
that could
sorry,
might lead to something.
How can we tell the authenticity of a doctor if they can't take time to make their signature eligible? Like, it's a little bit disingenuous to suggest.
I feel like ultimately this like whether the email was written professionally or not just doesn't seem that relevant at the end of the day.
I would consider it's relevant. I don't know how far down rabbit holes you want to get. This has nothing to do with a doctor's handwriting, which makes sense. People scribble shit because it's just a prescription. They don't need to like write handwriting well. If you're trying to write somebody that you know is getting a ton of emails and you're trying to present yourself as a professional and you write it like it looks like an Instagram DM, I mean, like you're so stupid. I can't even believe anybody even read your email. But I don't know. Maybe that's just me.
Probably just you.
Well, okay, I'm sorry, hold on. I said that rhetorically to sound nice at the end. I'm telling you that's how most people work in the real world. So if you're trying to get a job, if you're trying to write an important email, if you want something to be read, if you want people to pay attention to you, you should probably write with correct grammar and shit. I am 99% sure that any fucking conservative that's trying to fight me on this point probably talks about how important it is for people not to speak in ebonics or slang, but for some reason they're going to sit here and pretend that you can write an email that looks like you're sending somebody a message on MSN and like it's okay. Like that's beyond stupid.
No, but what I would say, right, and thank you, Colonel Dan, for showing up and bringing some truth to the room, right? What I would say though is that it goes directly to what Colonel Dan is saying, right? And there's no reason for anybody to be taking anything Dr. Fauci is making or any points that he's making serious, because you, Destiny, would agree, right, that the fucking grammar shouldn't be fucking controlled in such a way. So the fact that this point is being made, it doesn't even fucking matter. Fauci shouldn't be taken serious, and the fact that he's causing these opinions makes him fucking discreditable from the fucking start.
This has nothing to do with what the original claim was. The original claim was that there was a conspiracy to hide evidence that there was a conspiracy to leak or to create the coronavirus or whatever in China. That's what the original conversation was about.
No, I didn't say it was a conspiracy.
I literally said this isn't even in the
seat. That's.
I just heard you, so I stopped.
There we go. Thank you. Who'd you hear?
Oh, I literally said it.
Anyway, continue. Okay, so we're gonna go on and. Okay, I just want everybody to know that we can't just all yell at each other and we're not going to hear anything, okay? I just wanted to quickly ask, Colonel Dan, everybody in chat wants to know, what exactly actually is a COG?
Oh, true.
Sorry. You know, that's... So the acronym COG is Continuity of Government, which is a very broad, asymmetric, holistic approach to... If anything can jeopardize our nation's ability to continue to govern itself, it needs to be looked at and tracked and addressed. And it's typically done outside of the normal pillars of government, since the intelligence community, the Department of Justice. COG is a way that you guarantee that no matter what happens, pandemics, nuclear war, whatever, the next day there's still a government for this nation. It's all over. I mean, you can read about it until you fall asleep. It's everywhere. It used to be you couldn't even find it, but nothing's hidden on the internet anymore.
Okay, now that it's calmed down, Destiny, you can respond.
Yeah, nobody in here was claiming. I'm pretty sure we even said verbatim, why would we expect Fauci to have like all of the information about this particular thing? And the claim was, well, Fauci was intentionally hiding it from us. Look at these emails, that's evidence of that. I don't think anybody in here, or maybe there was and I missed it, I don't think anyone here was making strong claims that like, oh, Fauci is the ultimate source of information about the origination of this virus.
Like I said a minute ago, you were the one that posited that there was a conspiracy. I don't think anybody else fucking made a claim that there was a conspiracy.
What did we miss
just
the whole...
we were just arguing with this Sproticus guy that was arguing because of these fucking emails that it implied that like Fauci was in on hiding the virus.
That's what you wanted to hear, but you didn't bother listening to what the fuck he said.
I'm sorry. I have to cut in here. I am so sad. Like, critical thinking veteran, your opening thing was, I'm going to be keeping my eye out, hickety-hee-haw, for who's coming across being bad faith. And now you've been nothing but bad faith this entire discussion. Literally, your fucking skull is like a bad faith machine. It goes in your ear and comes out the opposite, sounding completely different than what we just said.
Notice honestly, how nobody else thinks that you're speaking the truth right now. Nobody else.
I actually will die on this hill.
Really quick, I will yield my time after this. Hold on.
Okay.
I will yield my time after this.
Maybe it never changed.
Okay.
I will yield my time after this, but I will say.
Okay, no, I'm gonna mute everybody. Okay. Man, we're so close to the end, and everybody's decided to do a pileup right where the finish line is. Okay, so Hunter's gonna finish whatever the hell he was saying, then CTV is gonna respond, and then we're gonna wrap it up because we're getting towards midnight.
Yeah, all I was gonna say is, here's a fact for you, CTV. The only time we've been able to have a productive conversation is when you were muted. So that's it. Thank you.
Right. So hold on, it's my time. It's my time, right? So here's the deal, right? There was a very productive conversation happening during the first two topics, right? I brought Colonel Dan in here for an expert opinion, right? Because the strength of the pack is the wolf, and the strength of the wolf is the pack, right? The fact that you're not a part of it is because you're just a fucking debate bro, and you don't know fucking shit, right?
I take that as a compliment. I take that as a compliment.
Shut the fuck up. This is what keeps happening, right? You don't understand mic control, right? You're just a fucking kid. Let me know when your balls drop, right? And then maybe we can have a productive conversation. Until then, go keep fucking debate broing it up because I don't give a fuck.
Is that what you say when you like lose debates the whole time?
Did you just
the other person being a debate bro? Is that like how?
There you go, right? That's it.
It's
That's
just
all you got.
Okay.
I know we have to move on.
Bro.
It's just I'm so sick.
Look, okay. We're done. We are done. Okay. But always support the wolf pack. Ooh. Okay. Anyway, we're gonna wrap up now. Everybody's gonna do ending statements and shout outs. We're gonna start with Nacho in the top left-hand corner.
Fauci is a bioweapon. I'm a doctor and I've literally never made a typo. With that being said, I'm an educator. Drug war. You can reclaim this dick. Dumb fuck. Find me on twitch.tv. I love you guys.